offer large prayers and show their piety.
I'm not showing my piety. I'm showing my vocabulary. All right. All right. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord Jesus Christ, we thank you for your bounty. We thank you for your constant providence to us. We thank you for this opportunity you provided us to spend this time with one another, to enjoy each other's company, to speak to your truths and to speak to the things that excite us and bring us joy and fascination. We ask that you bless this time together. Pray that it is good and fruitful. Pray that it is fruitful for our listeners. Pray that it is fruitful for our friendship. We ask all these things in your mighty name, in the mighty name of Jesus Christ. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
It was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen.
Amen. Yeah, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hey, you got the right one. There were no bees in the world.
Right one. No, there were no bees in the world.
All right, so hello, welcome to the Things That Don't Change. I feel like sometimes I do the intro now and sometimes I don't. But hello and welcome to the Things That Don't Change, where we endeavor to view an ever-changing and forever fluid world through the lens of eternity. That
You're
really
forgetting because you don't do it anymore.
Yeah, I don't do it anymore. So we have something slightly different today. We done something similar a couple of times, but I don't know. I just thought this would be kind of fun. So essentially, we are going to be feeding each other a few topics because one of the things I've realized, and I don't want to make a habit of this in this show, and this is part of why I suggested this as an idea, is that if you are talking about something and I don't know much about it, I will. My first inclination is to nod along as if I do, because I want to present myself on this show as some sort of expert. I know these things, right?
As a genius.
And similarly, I feel like you probably do the same thing, where if I'm talking and you're like, oh, I don't really know about this, the inclination is to be like, oh, well, I don't want to come off as, I don't know, so...
That never happens because I know everything.
Exactly. It's a completely one-way street. But just hypothetically, I figured... if that were something that both of us were dealing with, then it would be good for us to do a few micro topics that the other one might not be too educated on. So I told you, I was like, hey, I want you to come up with like a few things that you're like, I could just talk about this for a few minutes that I might not know anything about, and it gives us complete license to be like, yo, I'm a complete idiot on this, educate me, and like just ask questions, stoke the fire however we feel like inclined to do. So yeah.
Okay.
All right, so that being said, I need to actually pull up your list because I completely forgot to do that before the episode. We're totally prepared for this. It's great. All right. So all right, so your first topic was why Pope Pius XII being called Hitler's Pope is utter nonsense. We're starting with some real light fare.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so why is Pope Pius XII called Hitler's Pope to begin with?
So, okay. Yeah, so this is a personal pet peeve of mine.
I actually don't know anything about this. I know that you're very passionate about it, but I don't know much about it.
Okay, so Pius XII was Pope from 1939 until 1958, right? So
Those are fun years.
Exactly. You know, he became Pope right before, like, literally a couple of months before the Nazis rolled into Poland. And then, you know, was Pope through the war and the aftermath and all of that. And he grew up basically in the Vatican. I mean, like, you know, his family was a very prominent Roman family, very prominent Catholic family. From a very young age, he knew, hey, I'm going to become a priest one day. And he worked in the Vatican as a priest, you know, became in like part of the Secretary of State, you know, kind of. He spent time in Weimar, Germany, kind of as the nuncio to Bavaria. You know, he was kind of all over in the diplomatic part of the Vatican. He was very close to Pius XI, his predecessor. And, you know, a lot of the encyclicals that came out of Pius XI's papacy, you know, obviously the encyclicals have a lot of assistance from people close to the Pope, and Pius XII was one of those people. Eugenio Pacelli was his birth name, so Cardinal Pacelli was one of these people. So 1939 rolls around, and the war starts. By this time, Pacelli has become Pope Pius XII.
Right.
And, of course, throughout the war, there's a lot going on in Europe, right? And there's the Nazis, they're fighting the war, but then there's also this Holocaust thing, which a lot of people didn't know about until later in the war, that this awful thing had been going on behind the scenes. And so after the war, we'll get to the specifics of the war, but after the war, there starts to become this rumor of sorts that springs up in the mid to late 50s, early 60s, sometime in there. I think it was the 60s, because after Pius had died, that he was silent during the war, and he just kind of let everything happen around him. He knew about the Holocaust and just didn't really care. He was kind of a useful idiot, basically, for the Nazis in many ways. And that's kind of become an enduring fact, like a fact everyone knows but isn't actually true. Up and down the years, there was a famous book called Hitler's Pope, written by John Cornwell, or something like that. I don't remember his exact name. But it came out, I don't know, late 90s maybe. And the premise of that book was that he wasn't just silent, but he was also kind of in a way complicit and kind of okay with Hitler and what he did. Now, none of that's true. The Vatican secret archives, the Vatican archive, basically, people have gone through there, and it's very clear that throughout the war, Pius XII, well, yeah, sure, maybe he didn't come out and say, hey, the Nazis are evil, like that, those specific words, like he would speak in ways that were, oh, racism isn't something we should be kind of getting engaged with.
Right.
The Pius XI released an encyclical, Mit Brenniger Sorge, something like that. I don't remember the exact what the German is, but basically it was written in German, so it's okay. Clearly, it's meant to be towards a certain group of people, like a certain country. So this encyclical, which Pius XI wrote, but Pius XII, as Cardinal Pacelli, had a hand in writing, decried racism and how if one who exalts race and nation above that of people and God and religion,
the common good of humanity, and
that's basically anathema. Like that's foolishness. I think that's really the word they use, is like it's foolishness. And then they kind of go on to go after.
That's unhelpful.
Yeah, it's extremely unhelpful. But basically, this entire encyclical kind of goes after Nazi and nationalist ideology and racist ideology, without saying it's going after the Nazis or the fascist Germans or any of these groups. And it was all the bishops in Germany had it read at the churches on Palm Sunday. I think it was either Palm or Easter Sunday. But clearly this is something that they smuggled it into Germany. Like, they weren't able to get it past the lines without smuggling it into the country, like this encyclical. Yeah. And then they disseminated it to have it read. The Nazis were at the doors to collect it. So that's just to say that Pius XII, while he wasn't Pope at the time, he did have a role in producing that. Throughout the war, he was known to be sheltering like Jews in Castel Gandolfo, and also giving permission to different monasteries around Germany, Poland, to also shelter Jews. To keep them away from the Nazis. There's records of like Jews and others in concentration camps who would go up to Catholic priests who were also there, because we forget Hitler didn't just not like Jews. He hated Catholics. He hated Polish. He hated communists. He hated trade union. He hated everybody.
He liked Germanic people.
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes.
Unless you had the wrong religion.
Right. The wrong religion, or the wrong genes, or the wrong
exactly. But anyway, there was reports of like Jews who'd go up to priests in concentration camps and be like, your Pope needs to stop saying things, because like not even like things like, hey, Hitler sucks, like just saying like different things that were easily interpreted
things that
as
conflict with the ideology. The church tends to deal in these sort of terms a lot of the time. Like, we think of like the medieval popes. The medieval popes tend to be a lot more direct in their political, shall we say, political manipulation. And I don't say that as a bad term, but it's like that's what the Pope did a lot of the time, was that he was a political figure as well as a religious figure, and so he had a large political role within Europe, within the world, but mainly within Europe, and yet lately, like throughout the last few hundred years, it's like, okay, do we want to just snuff out this one particular enemy of the common good, of the will of God, or do we want to say, let's talk about everything that this particular person stands for conceptually, so that even if they are deposed, that still applies to the next guy, because someone else will try to
Right.
step into the power vacuum.
Yeah,
You know?
and the other thing, just the reality of the worlds from the 19th into the 20th century, and even into the 21st century, is that the temporal power of the Pope is so declines that the role that the Pope has to play has to be kind of more of a not indirect in the sense that he's not doing as much, but he kind of needs to be a little bit more smart about the way that he addresses
Right.
different issues. I think it was Stalin. It was either Hitler or Stalin. They both probably felt this, but Hitler or Stalin, when they heard about something the Pope said, how many divisions does the Pope have again? Basically saying like, what do I care? I could just roll into his country and like, what are they going to do?
That sounds like Stalin.
Yeah, I think that was Stalin.
Yeah, somebody with an iconic mustache who did some evil things.
Now, granted, Hitler, when he took control of Rome after the collapse of Italy in 1943, I think it was 33, he stationed, tanks around the Vatican as if he was going to move in at any point, which he never ended up doing. But, they were ready to go with that. But anyway, so a lot of people in concentration camps would go up to Catholic priests and be like, your Pope needs to shut up because every time he says something, it's worse for us in here, So that just goes to show that, like, even if he wasn't saying things that we'd be like, oh, that's explicitly against this person, clearly the Nazis took it to be against them.
Right.
Clearly Hitler was upset with that. And that's also not even getting into the fact that Pius XII also had a hand in some of the German resistance movements.
Yeah.
There's Joseph Muller, I believe is the name of the man who was a go-between between the Vatican and William Canaris, William Canaris was the head of the Abwehr, which was basically like the military intelligence arm of the Wehrmacht. And he was head of this, but he was also he became anti-Nazi as the years went on. And they eventually shut down the entire organization because him and a bunch of his cohorts were found to be traitors to the Nazi cause and they were arrested. But Joseph Muller was kind of the go-between between him in the resistance and then also the Pope back in Rome, the people in the Vatican. And a lot of information would then get to the British from there about what's going on in Germany. There's some evidence, we're not sure about this, that maybe Pius XII may have known something of like the 20th of July plot, where they tried to assassinate Hitler with the Wolf Slayer and they failed, Operation Valkyrie. But again, we don't know what he may or may not have done. The Pope being involved in the assassination, I doubt he knew exactly what was going on if he was involved, but at least a go-between of some sort between, hey, Hitler might not be around, let the British know X, Y, Z, that type of thing. So again, this is the role the Pope played. After the war, like a lot of the Jewish organizations were very laudatory, very thankful to the Pope for the things that he'd done. They saw him as an ally throughout this entire, the entire war. Israel Zoli, who was the chief rabbi of Rome, actually converted to Catholicism after the war, and one of the reasons he gave was that he was so impressed by the Pope's charity throughout that, and he actually took the name Eugenio as his baptismal name, as the Pope's actual first name. So this just goes to show that even right after the war, people saw the Pope as this figure who, was fighting the good fight, even if he wasn't out there every day with the paper in his hand saying, hey, Hitler's got to go down, we got to kill Hitler, or something like that. But he was behind the scenes doing all the charitable things to try and make sure that the Jews that he could find were safe in Castel Gandolfo, away from the roundup squads or whatever. And then also that the priests in these different countries had the resources they needed to kind of help out. Now that all changed in the early 60s after the Pope died, when a play known as The Deputy was released in East Germany, East Berlin. And the playwright, Roth Huckolf, I think was his name, it's a little tenuous because he can never quite prove these things, but like he was a known friend of other playwrights who were like communist KGB assets.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, is this a KGB plot to kind of color the image of the Pope to discredit the church? And from that point forward,
on that, but
right, and it's really from that point forward, from early '60s when this play came out, that the myth of Hitler's Pope became a thing. Because like in the play, the Pope, it was Pope somebody else who just basically was silent all the time whenever like the bad stuff and the news was coming to him. He was just, I don't want to hear it. So that kind of created the myth of Hitler's Pope, and it persists even down the centuries, even amongst some Catholics. A friend of ours who will remain nameless made a comment about it a week ago, and it got me a bit upset.
Yeah. So there's not just the among friends, among like just general public discourse, but also you also have movies that talk about it. Like we had Conclave recently talking about like
Yes.
oh, what's the worst that's gonna happen? We had a Nazi pope. We had like whatever, and like that one was actually I think talking about Benedict XVI, which is also ridiculous.
Which frustrates me. That's another pet peeve of mine.
That one's my pet peeve. Like you can have Pope Pius XII as your main pet peeve. Mine is Benedict XVI.
Yeah.
Like but you have movies that'll do that, and where they talk about like, oh well, back in the day, the Pope once supported the Nazis or whatever. And it's like, give me one citation, like just one solid citation, because we talked about this once before, I think, on air, where we were talking about the idea of I think we often forget, and this goes for both the good guys and bad guys of history. We forget that, like, if we believe or hope that these people yet live, then we still don't have license to gossip about them just because they're dead. It's like you think of like like Julius Caesar or whatever. It's like we can make jokes, or at least we feel like we can make jokes at Caesar's expense all the time, no matter how slanderous or terrible or morbid they are, what a dark humor they are. And it's like, how long does someone have to be dead for that to become okay? The answer is technically never. Like, if it's not okay, like, 10 years after their death, it's actually not okay 2,000 years after their death. And I'm not saying that all humor surrounding someone is bad, because sometimes a dark humor about someone living is fine, and sometimes a dark humor about someone dead is fine.
Right.
But the same standard has to be applied. But yeah, you have, it fits the particular narrative that someone's trying to spin of, oh, well, sometimes the guys that we consider the good guys are actually the bad guys, or they're like, playing both sides, trying to come out on top or whatever. So Hitler's Pope, the idea postulated by this book. So, when this nameless friend of ours, was saying in our group chat something about Hitler's Pope, and you just went off on this dude. So it was very entertaining, by the way. But you and one of our other friends was talking. Actually, I can name that friend. It was Patrick, our other co-host.
Yes, good old Patrick.
But you guys were both talking about how poorly cited this book was. That it was just a, hey, but what if? I don't know. We heard some whispers,
Yeah.
Having not looked into this myself, on a scale of infiltration to the Great Adventure Bible, like, what kind of level of citation are we talking here?
So I haven't read the book like at length. However, I've seen snippets and people discuss some of the more particulars. It's been a while since I've looked into those. So I want to say it's probably on kind of like the infiltration level of kind of like, well, we heard somebody said something like this, or because this, we're going to kind of run with that and kind of embellish a bit to kind of come up with a conclusion that might not be warranted by the evidence.
Yeah.
And I think the most egregious thing is the cover itself. So picture you have a book that says Hitler's Pope on it, right? That's the title that's right across the top of that cover. And then you have a black and white picture of the Pope, or a man who seems to be the Pope, walking out of a building with all these military people around him. What do you think? He just stepped out of a meeting with Hitler, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the image that you get. Yet the picture that they use is a picture of Cardinal Pacelli in like 1925 coming out of like the chancellery in Bavaria when he was the nuncio to the Weimar Republic in Bavaria.
Right.
And it's like, Hitler wasn't even in power yet. Why'd you choose that picture? Because it looks scary and German?
Right.
That's just completely misleading from the outset.
Yeah. No, that's a tricky thing. And like, it is one of those things that you can't really have something like that and say this isn't propaganda. Yeah. And here's the thing. Here's a controversial statement that people don't really consider a lot of the time. Propaganda is not necessarily inherently a bad thing. Like, you're trying to propagate an idea. That's what propaganda is. Like people might accuse us of being Catholic propaganda. They're correct. Like,
yeah, because we think that this is a good thing that people shouldn't get involved with.
Right. But you can't say oh, I'm not trying to propagandize. I'm just trying to uncover the truth or whatever. When it's like you literally are trying to paint this image just in the front cover of, oh, well, this is a pope coming out of this meeting with the Nazis. You know, it's like you're clearly spinning some things. Granted, I don't know if that was on the part of the author or the publisher.
Yeah, it could have been an accident.
Like,
or the publisher did something,
yeah.
or he had bad information about what it was. Yeah, I mean, there's
Right.
a million different innocent reasons why that wasn't trying to be misleading, but it still contributes to being a bit misleading.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a rough time. Thank you for for the education on that, because that's something that like I frequently hear about. Apologies as I'm turning away from the microphone. I'll pour it over here. That's something I frequently hear about, but I don't actually know much about. And I always feel like, as an educated Catholic, or one who likes to consider himself an educated Catholic, I really ought to have a good defense of that, and I never really do.
It's frustrating because I took a course in college. This is when I first learned about any of this, which was I forget exactly what it was called. It was like the Holocaust in the Christian World or something like that. I'm like, oh, that sounds like a fun G course. Let's take that one. Me and my friend did, and it quickly became clear that it's trying to make the point that Christianity was the Christian culture, and then also just the environment of Christianity was what created the Holocaust. And that Christians have been anti-Jew the whole time. And I get we've had a very rough history as Christians with how we treat the Jewish people, and there's a lot of bad things in there.
Yeah.
I get that. But of course, then when the teacher comes out and starts saying these things like, oh, and then the Pope was complicit, and the Pope did this, and the Pope did that, it's like, wait a second. Okay, there's something here that doesn't seem right to me. So then at the end of the semester, we had to do a book report on some book related to the topic. So I'm like, I'm going to find a book that tries to look into this.
Yeah.
And I read Hitler, the War, and the Pope by Ronald Rishlack. Very good book, very long book, very well done, well documented book that kind of goes through and says that no, a lot of these things that we claim about Hitler's Pope, it's all falsehoods, and the historical record does not really stand up to that. Now, you could go and say, hey, Pius XII should have done more. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Like, if you're in that situation and like
there are
there's
a lot
all
of
these
things that both of us should have done more on.
Absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
and there's all these like catastrophes and war and death and people getting slaughtered all over Europe. Like, yeah, I mean, you have to figure out something to do and then do it if you're trying to stand up to that. And that might at some points be the best option you could have done. It might at some points not been the best option you could have done. That's fair to give that critique. But again, then trying to paint a person as, oh, well, they didn't do anything, they didn't care. It's like, no,
Right.
take the whole story and all the evidence here, and then kind of look into
And
it.
there's also, it's a very different critique to say someone was too passive than to say someone enabled.
Yeah, exactly.
So like someone's saying that, oh, he could have done more. That is, I don't know, maybe true.
Yeah,
but
like there's some books that say Pius XII should have done more. It's like, okay, that's more fair than he was somehow complicit.
Like, and you can make, but you can also make that critique of literally every pope.
Yeah.
You can look at the issues of the day and say, well, could he have done more? Yeah, probably. But he also had other responsibilities to tend to. Like, can I do more for you or for my wife or for my daughter or for my parents? Yeah, but I also have to divide my attention and energy among all of the people in my life.
Right. Like people get on like Pope Francis's case for like the agreement he made with the CCP in China about like, oh, he betrayed the underground or this, and it's like, I don't know. Like, that doesn't seem like an easy situation to me.
Yeah.
Like you have this communist government that's suppressing the church. I don't know what the right call was. Maybe he made the right call. Maybe he made the wrong call. Maybe he was just trying to make the best call that he had.
I don't know if there's an
information that he had.
objectively right call. Just to like fill our listeners in on that who might not be familiar with the case. It's essentially that we've had this underground Catholic Church in China for a long time, and since we're talking about this episode is going to get like demonetized and
whatever.
Have we ever monetized an episode? I don't know.
No, we have not.
But it's going to be like very suppressed. So hey, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and leave a comment so that helps us in the algorithm since we're talking about China. But anyway, so yeah, we've had this underground church in China for a very long time, and this is going to be like the Reader's Digest version of this. And then there was the Catholic Church instituted by the Chinese government, like the Chinese government, because their stamp of approval on this, but they don't actually have valid prelates. They don't have valid bishops, right? And so there's the legitimate, like, you can get valid sacraments here church, which is underground and secret and like it's like you gotta have the password to get in. I don't know. I've never been in China, but
Yeah.
but it's very like we can't be found out, or it'll be the death. It'll be the end of us, right? And then you have the public church, which is the bishops are picked by the government, and which, in fairness to His Holiness Pope Francis, in fairness, that's not the first time that we've had the government picked the bishops. Like that's happened several times in history. That's not unfounded.
Yeah, like kings used to do that sometimes.
Yeah.
That was a huge controversy in the Holy Roman Empire. For exactly is who appoints the bishops.
Right. So, yeah. So the government was appointing these bishops. They did not have valid holy orders, or at least not valid anointings, and therefore these churches don't have valid sacraments. And so, it's this whole big thing of, okay, well, there's a dichotomy of there's a version of Catholicism, or at least something that professes to be Catholicism, that is not being suppressed by the Chinese government. And then we have actual sacramental Catholicism that is being suppressed by the Chinese government and therefore is inaccessible to most people. And so the question is, do we try to pour into the underground religious resistance movement, which might make things way worse for everybody there, but might avail more sacraments? Or do we just say, hey, you know what? We are going to baptize the government-instituted Catholic Church and give actual holy orders to these people, so that and consider them to be within communion of the church, so that these can be publicly accessible sacraments. Like, both of those are the right and wrong answer.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because, I mean, even if a bishop's chosen by the CCP, let's say, I mean, if the Pope says, yeah, you're a bishop, that's the important thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right, so we're like a half hour into this. We've gone over one topic. You want to shoot one my way?
Yeah. So while we're talking...
Well, I was gonna say, do we want to do? I have one that's like history, or do we want to do the other one that's history? Or do we want to say, like, let's do something completely different, mix it up, and then go back to history?
Well, I was gonna say, while we're talking about people who get maligned in certain ways, I was gonna say, tell me about the Romanovs.
Oh yeah. Okay. So. Okay, so the Romanovs...
I know you love talking about the Romanovs.
I do love talking about the Romanovs.
Yeah, no, that's a huge, a huge point of interest of yours.
Yes. Okay. So I feel like most of our friends have like their one point of absolute like terrible fixation on one thing in history or politics, and so like for our friend Chris, our old producer, that's North Korea. He's obsessed with North Korea. He knows a lot about North Korea. And whenever I have a question about North Korea, something I do not know much about, I'm like, hey, Chris, what's going on with this, right? My North Korea is the Romanov, Romanov family. So, okay, so the Romanovs were the royal family of Russia at the dawn of World War I. They were also the last royal family of Russia. And I think this is... Okay, so, like, there are things that, like, if you're not interested in history when you're in, let's say, middle school and high school, right? Like, you might not really pay much attention to different facets of history. Like, oh, I know something weird was going on in Italy around the turn of the century. Like I don't really know the particulars. You'll hear Marie Antoinette. You'll be like, I know that's someone. Like, I don't know much of her story. You'll hear someone say, "Let them eat cake," and you'll go, I know someone said that at a time where that was a controversial or funny comment. I don't know which. I don't know which one.
Except she never did say it.
Right. but you'll hear things like that, and you'll be like, okay, well, yeah, but there are certain things that stand out. And that is always Hitler. Like, everyone knows who Hitler is, and so there'll be Hitler, Caesar, there'll be generally the Roman Empire. What's that?
Napoleon.
Yeah, Napoleon. It's like there are certain things that, like, even if you aren't interested in history, you know about these things, right? And I do not understand, for the life of me, why the death of the Romanov family is not one of those things. Like,
Yeah.
this was one of the most impactful moments in modern history, and yet it's something that, like, you might say the Romanov family, you might say Tsar Nicholas II, you might say Alexandra Fyodorovna, and someone will be like, who is that? Like,
Yeah. And be like, hey, what about that movie Anastasia?
right. so one time I was trying to explain to my wife, like, I talk about this, I don't know if I've ever actually talked about this on air, but my wife, Jess, always gets annoyed at how often I say this. She's not denying it's true. It's just sort of like one of those things that, like, okay, yeah, we know you said this before. And that's, I always say that if you ask the question of who is deeper, men or women, the answer is that, as a sweeping generalization, there are exceptions to on both sides, but generally speaking, men are deeper in the macro sense and women are deeper in the micro sense. And the example that I've given of this is, I was saying to Jess, I was like, when you are crying to me talking about something, it's normally something going on with your family. When I am crying talking to you about something, it's talking about the separation of the church in the East and the church with the West. Or it's about the death of the Romanov family, or it's about, like, I'm talking about, like, these things that happened a long time ago. And so, like, one time I'm explaining, and I have, like, literal tears streaming down my face, just giving the background of something that had to do with the Romanovs, but something that happened after them. And Jess is like, hey, I actually, like, need to get on a phone call. Is there, like, a short version of this? I was like, yeah, you remember the movie Anastasia? She's like, yeah. And I was like, okay, just for all intents and purposes, think of that. It's totally historically inaccurate, but it works for this conversation. Like, and she's like, okay, got it. But yeah, so at the time in Europe, this is like turn of the 20th century, right? At the time in Europe, most of Europe was ruled by one family. It was the grandchildren of Queen Victoria, right? And so it's a bunch of cousins and brothers and sisters who are all ruling Europe, and you know, there's that old joke that people always make about, like, oh, what was World War I fought over? Well, death technology had gotten really good, and there were family feuds. Like,
Yeah.
That's kind of what World War I was fought over.
Yeah.
But there's more to it than that. But that, for all intents and purposes, actually kind of works as an explanation. So
We could do a whole podcast on
Yes.
why did World War One start.
So not even a podcast episode.
No, a whole podcast.
So in any case, so Tsar Nicholas II, back when he was the Tsarevich, like the prince, the crown prince. So he was introduced to his cousin. Yes, they were first cousins. This is another Victoria and Albert sort of scenario. It was fashionable at the time to keep all that lovely money in the family, as Max Detweiler said in Sound of Music. And so they kept intermarrying within the family, and then they realized, oh, that's why everybody's hemophiliac and dying. And Tsar Nicholas and Alex of Hesse's son is no exception. But anyway, so he was introduced to Princess Alex of Hesse and by Rhine, and absolutely fell head over heels in love with her. And eventually, after several attempts, by the way, Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany was very proud of himself for having set up the happy couple. Like, he was so proud of his cousins for falling in love at his urging, and they actually had, for the first stretch, a lovely relationship. Now, here's the thing.
I wonder how proud Kaiser Wilhelm was when they're blasting each other to pieces on the Eastern Front.
So
anyway,
that was actually like a very contentious issue for him, is that he thought, oh, well, we're friends.
Yeah.
Why are you not fighting by my side? Like,
Yeah.
I introduced you guys. This whole family wouldn't exist without me. And remember all that time we spent on your boat together? And like, it was actually something that he took very personally.
Yeah. I get it.
So in any case, the reason why them being introduced by Kaiser Wilhelm is a pertinent fact, and the reason why her being originally Alex of Hesse and by Rhine is a pertinent fact is that makes her German. And she eventually marries Tsar Nicholas II and changes her name to Alexandra Fyodorovna, and becomes the Tsarina, the queen, and or empress, or however you want to call it. But she is the queen for all intents and purposes of Russia, and he is the last monarch of Russia. He doesn't know that at the time. Here's the thing about Tsar Nicholas II. I actually love Tsar Nicholas II. Like, he's somebody that, like, he was such a good and holy and God-fearing man. I would love to hang out with him and just like share a vodka with him, whatever it is he drank. Like, like I would love to just sit down and like have a conversation with him. I hope that one day I have the chance to meet him in heaven. He is actually revered as a saint in the Orthodox Church. He and his wife, and actually their 5 children. All their children are revered as passion bearers, which is a title that they give to people who are not actually religious martyrs, but went to their death with a Christ-like piety. And so Tsar Nicholas II was a wonderful, God-fearing man who was a terribly morally driven man. He was a terrible monarch. When I say I love Tsar Nicholas II, that's a controversial statement because that sounds like I'm saying he was so good at ruling Russia. He was not. He was administratively a mess. Now, the tricky thing is that Russia is, Russia has recently suffered some crushing defeats.
Got their butt kicked by the Japanese in 1905.
Yes. This is going to be a really good transition into your topic about Japan. But, okay, so yeah, they got their butt handed to them by the Japanese, and their economy's not doing great. Their country morale, not doing great. Average life of the average citizen, terrible. And there's this movement of, hey, like, the king really isn't doing well here, and so we should probably start to take things over ourselves. You do have the Duma, you have like the or it wasn't called the Duma at the time, but you have the representatives in the same way that, like, England has Parliament, but they don't actually have that much power. They only have as much power as the Tsar acknowledges them having, and so it's really kind of up to him.
Was it like the Estates General in like the Ancien regime France, where it was like, hey, they kind of meet, but only when the king wants them to come, and if he doesn't want them, they're not coming.
When the king doesn't want them to come, they just don't exist for 20 years at a time.
Yeah.
And so, it was like that. So, Tsarina Alexandra, she starts giving birth to the progeny of the royal family, including her son Alexei, who is going to be the heir apparent. It was the heir apparent to the throne of Russia. We'll get back to Alexei in a second. But there's like too much. I'm trying to figure out how to condense this. All right, so
maybe we should do an episode on the Romanovs.
So she starts having kids, and if she were alive today, meaning like if she had been born at a different time and were alive today, we would have recognized that she was going through either a very, very, very serious postpartum depression or a postpartum psychosis. Like, her grasp on reality was not very good. The thing about Tsar Nicholas II at the time is that he was trying his best to run the country, fix problems, but no one was allowed to meet with him without his wife present. And his wife just shut everything down. And Tsar Nicholas has a dual responsibility of, I am in charge of the country, I also have to tend to the needs of my wife. And he always ended up deferring to, I need to tend to the needs of my wife. And she has no administrative experience. She's really terrible at this, but she keeps insisting that we have to do these things. Okay, well, if it'll make you happy, dear. And so he keeps bowing to the needs of his wife, whose grasp on reality is really, really bad at the time. That is compounded by the fact that her son, Alexei, is terribly hemophiliac because, well, we've had a lot of cousin marriage in the last few generations. And so these genes really aren't mixing well. Or they're mixing a little too well. And, and so he just keeps, like, every tiny scrape, he's hemorrhaging, you know? And then we have Rasputin. And Rasputin, in Russia, not just at the time, but also now, there are the holy healers. Like, the guys that say, like, the belief is that they have been given some gift of healing by God, and so they pray over you or something like that, and they heal you miraculously. And that's a big thing in Russia. And are all of them real? Are any of them real? I don't know. They might be. It might be placebo effect. Either way, whatever, you're better. And so Rasputin is this alleged holy healer, right? And we're not going to go into Rasputin's actual history. There's too much, and it's not really pertinent to the story. But he is put in charge of healing Alexei, and he somehow seems to be miraculously healing him. Now, this one we actually do know what happened, because Alexei was seeing all of the best doctors in Russia at the time, and all the best doctors in Russia were saying, "Well, just give him aspirin for for the pain and everything." The thing about aspirin is that it is a blood thinner. Yeah. And so if you're hemophiliac, that's not really good. And so his hemophilia is getting worse because he's constantly on aspirin. Whereas Rasputin says, hey, I'm going to do my thing, but I don't want any drugs involved. Like, it has to be just from God, right? And so he takes him off of aspirin. And so he starts getting better. Not great, but better. And so the Tsarina is put into this position of great loyalty to Rasputin. I keep wanting to say Rasputin just because, like, that's how people are going to, like, recognize him, but that wasn't his name. I'm sorry. So anyway, so Rasputin supposedly heals her son. She has this great loyalty to him, and so he becomes her, like, chief vizier, like her chief advisor in a way. Not officially, but just, like, functionally. He is the person who is advising the queen on what to do. World War I is upon us, and Tsar Nicholas II, a bunch of his generals are suffering terrible defeats or quitting, and so he is just, all right, I got to be with my military, and so he goes over to be with his military to take command. The thing about Tsar Nicholas II, he's not a good king. He's really not a good military tactician, and so it's getting even worse under his guiding hand. But he's trying to save face of, like, no, I care about my troops, I care about my people, and so I'm going to go be with them. So the military is doing worse. In the meantime, hometown Russia, back in Moscow, everything is being run by the Tsarina, by the queen, and kind of Rasputin. Why is he running things? He has no official position. No one elected this guy. He has no inheritance of any sort of political power. And so the economy's doing terrible. The war is going terribly for Russia at the time. And so the Russian people go, all right, what is up with this? There were these rumors going around, which I don't think actually have any credence of oh, well, the queen and Rasputin, they're having some, like, extramarital affair, and it's like, there's not actually any credence to that. It's just a matter of they were very close, and people were wanting to slander them because they were angry at them.
Yeah.
We don't actually have any historical evidence of that, and again, we shouldn't be slandering the dead, right? So, in any case, so all of this culminates in there's a revolution in Russia. Having a revolution during World War I means that things are really bad.
Yeah.
Like, if you're in the middle of World War I and you're like, all right, guys, let's revolt against the government, things are bad. And so there's this huge revolution, and Tsar Nicholas II signs over all of his authority to the provisional government. There's this new provisional government put in place, and he says, all right, I will sign over all of my authority. I feel compelled by God to do so for the good of my people and the good of my family, the two things over which I have charge. I'm going to sign over my authority to this provisional government. So he signs over his authority, right? And then he is thinking, okay, I'm going to go to England and have some political asylum there. There was not actually an official invitation by England, but there have been some insinuations over the time, over like the last year of like, oh, well, England, of course, my dear friend George, or Edward at the time, like he's going to help me out, dear cousin Eddie. And so he's going to
Dear cousin Eddie.
And so he's going to help me out. We're good friends. And so there's this insinuation without any official offer, which was important on the part of England at the time. The liaison between them at the time was Sir George Buchanan, and Sir George Buchanan is really, really, really trying to say, hey, we really need to get them an official offer for asylum, or they're gonna get killed. And he keeps getting the response back of, just stall for a bit. Not just yet. And he's like, guys, there's no stalling. It has to happen now, or you're never going to see your cousin again. And so I brought up earlier that the Tsarina was German by birth. The reason I brought that up is because that really lowered the opinion of the Russian people to the woman who is running Moscow and the entire country right now, because, hey, our current enemy is Germany, where you're from, and you were introduced to our king by the guy we're fighting against. And so people really didn't like her. And so eventually the provisional government that he just signed all of his authority over to arrests Tsar Nicholas II and his entire family. Not for any crime, but because that's the only way they can keep them safe.
Now, by this point, I presume Lenin's shown up and has started the Communist Revolution.
Yeah, Bolsheviks,
Lenin's shown up because
Yeah.
Wilhelm II said, you want to travel through Germany? Go for it. We don't care.
Go for it, man! And so the Bolshevik Revolution is upon us. And so you have the first revolution. Okay, we're going to sign over all of our authority to this provisional government. That provisional government lasts like 8 months or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
And then the Bolsheviks take over, and because there's another revolution, and they say, and there's this sort of uneasy who is in charge for a bit, because they didn't just completely overthrow everything and start over. They're like, whoa. And so, still, the provisional government has some sort of protective custody over the Romanovs, until suddenly it dissipates. The Romanovs have been in exile for the last few years, and eventually the Bolsheviks start to worry that, hey, as long as Tsar Nicholas II, and even more than him, as long as Alexei, like the son, the Tsarevich, the heir apparent to the throne, the crown prince, as long as they are still alive, there's a threat to our grand republic. Because,
and we know how much the communists don't like threats to their government. Just ask Trotsky.
Right. and so they all collectively decide, hey, I think the only thing, if we're going to preserve our wonderful socialist utopia, and granted, socialism really wasn't working, but it was working better than really, 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 really failing at monarchy.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like, yeah, the economy was just terrible. The average living situation was terrible in Russia, and the socialists brought it to one step above terrible,
Yeah.
which means that things are getting better. And so they eventually decide in 1918, we are going to shoot and kill all of the Romanov family. There can't be a trace of their bloodline left. The only one who survived was the Queen Mother, Nicholas's mother, because she wasn't going to have any progeny, so
Yeah.
whatever. And she's also in France at the time, and so
I knew that because I saw Anastasia.
right. And so they are without a word just sort of like whisked into this other room, and they're all shot. Not to be gruesome, but the girls had a bunch of jewels sewn into their dresses. It was like one of the few precious possessions they were able to take with them. They sewed them into their clothes so that they could like conceal them in a way, like keep some riches on them. Well, bullets weren't of the highest quality at the time, not the kind of quality they're at right now. Their penetration force wasn't great, and so for many of the daughters, they tried to shoot the daughters, and the bullets aren't really getting through the accidental armor they have, and so we're going to have to bayonet them to death. So these precious girls are shot and then bayoneted to death, and the entire family is killed. That in itself is tragic on an overarching perspective. And I recognize how much this 5-minute topic has turned into we each took like a half hour with our first topic, but
yeah,
here we go. So the overarching significance of this, the economies in the rest of Europe also not doing great. Everyone's rationing. It's World War I. The country morale also not doing great. It's World War I. You see that, monarchy has been the way that we've been doing everything for the last several thousand years. There's one guy in charge, and then there's like the guys under him, like the counts and the earls, depending on what country you're in, the dukes, the marquises or marquises, depending on what country you're in. You have this hierarchy of the aristocracy, and then you have the serfs or the common people or the peasants or whatever, and like there's this higher class and there's this lower class. This is how things have worked for a very, very, very long time, and there's significance to that because even though that did have some problems, it also made things like communicating the idea of the hierarchy of the church supernatural. Not supernatural, but supernatural, like hypernatural, because communicating the hierarchy of the church, that's just like the rest of the world we live in, so fine, cool. Communicating the hierarchy of heaven, like everything has a hierarchy. At the time, everything's not going great for really anyone in Europe, and so everyone starts reading about this thing going on in Russia, that, Russia was doing really badly, and then the socialists took over. And they're doing slightly better now. So maybe what we need to do is depose all the monarchies and start republics. Because that seems to be working for Russia for like 5 years. But like this seems to be working for Russia, so maybe we have to do that. And so if you read the letters in between the monarchs at the time in Europe, the letters are basically saying, hey, I'm looking at what's happening to Nicky. That's actually what they called him. That's not being funny. Like, they're like, hey, I'm seeing what's happening to Nicky and his family. I think our days might be numbered. Not just their days in office, like their days on the throne, but like their days on Earth might be numbered. And so what happens is that, once he's killed, let's just all sign over our authority to governments as well to keep ourselves alive. There are other motivations, but that's one of them. And so
I mean, look at Europe, right? I mean, there was a communist revolution in Germany, which Pius XII actually was in Bavaria at the time.
Yeah.
And it also didn't work. And they became the Weimar Republic.
Well, it didn't work, but did set the groundwork for
Yes.
a certain figure in Germany from Austria to take power when he accused
true.
those revolutionaries of setting fire to the capital in Germany.
Yes.
So
and then you also had the king in Italy gave way to Mussolini.
right,
Blessed Karl of Austria stepped down, and then
right,
the whole thing fragmented. The French
Right.
were already doing the Republic thing,
right,
and the British are the British.
and the Spanish became a republic
Spanish,
for like
yeah,
30
yeah.
years, like
Right, they had Franco.
and functionally, we now have a couple of monarchies that actually have any actual weight, like, and it's most monarchies that we have nowadays are pure figurehead. It's just for the cosplay of it, you know?
Yeah.
It's just because, well, it's kind of fun to have a monarch, you know? Like, this one doesn't connect to this particular thing, but like, it's like the current emperor of Japan. Fun fact: Japan still has an emperor.
Yeah.
He doesn't do anything.
No.
In terms of the government, but he does still actually. He is technically still the emperor. Why? Because it's kind of fun to have a guy who dresses up like that. You know, it's kind of fun.
I don't even know if he dresses up anymore besides just wearing a suit, but
Right,
yeah, he still plays the role.
But that's
He's there for
why.
all the
That's
official,
why after
yeah.
World War II, it was like, oh yeah, you can still have your emperor because like that's culturally significant.
Yeah.
And now it's just some guy who wears a business suit and meets
It's
some
culturally
people.
significant, and until like 5 seconds ago when we
Yeah.
forced him to say otherwise, you kind of thought he was God, so
Right.
we'll
There
let
was
you
a-
have him.
Right. There was a okay, so there was this movie called Heads of State, starring John Cena and Idris Elba, and I thought this.
Oh,
movie
is this the
looked-
Amazon one?
Yeah, I thought. This,
Yeah, I saw that.
I thought this movie looked so fun, and so I watched it with Jess, and it was like you came so close to being so great. But it
I
was-
totally agree. You
Yeah.
know, I was thinking the same thing. I'm like,
Yeah.
I saw Idris Elba. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be like a stupid
Yeah.
fun movie. And it's like, you just didn't quite get it.
Yeah, it's like they had that one guy that like they're in the safe house and there's this one American guy that's just absolutely like kicking ass and
Yeah.
and Idris Elba goes like, what a nutter, and John Cena says very unnaturally, yeah, but he's America's nutter, and and it's like that scene would have been fantastic if I had any bloody idea who this guy was.
Right.
But I don't, and I don't care about him.
Yeah.
And so it was like things like that. It was like, hey, you're so close to making this a great movie. But in any case, one of my favorite lines is that like the plot is that the president and the prime minister of the UK are on Air Force One together, and Air Force One is shot down, and they're just in the wilderness, just the two of them, and they have to like fight their way back to civilized society and into their allies, and they are presumed dead, and so they're trying to keep a low profile. And at one point, Idris Elba goes, "No, you can't just go up and talk to them. We're two of the most recognizable men in the world." And John Cena says, "You're not even the most recognizable British person." And I love that because it's so true. It's like yeah, the president of the United States is a super recognizable figure. Most people in America, if you ask them what does the prime minister of the UK look like, they'd be like, is he that guy with like the blonde hair and like the no, that's he hasn't been prime minister for a while. Like
Yeah.
But in any case, so going back briefly and then we'll wrap up this particular topic, but and maybe move on to some shorter ones. I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
At the rate we're going.
So this I think is the death of the Romanovs, or the deposition and then the death of the Romanovs. I think is one of the most culturally significant moments in modern history, because it is where it was the final moment in which everything that we've based society on up to this point can now just be gotten rid of all over Europe and therefore
Yeah.
all over the West. Ironically, because they're in the East, but it's like, well, they're in Russia. It's kind of both, but oh, sorry, something just popped up on my computer. So
As it does.
yeah. So in any case,
Turn off those sticky keys.
yeah. So like, see, everything that we based all this on, everything we base our society on, can just be gotten rid of all over Europe and therefore all over the West. And granted, in the United States, we were already kind of doing the Republic thing, and actually we're succeeding at it pretty well. Like, we're doing pretty well with it. We weren't quite the superpower that we are now. We give it a couple decades, but it was a huge thing to all of a sudden be like, oh, now everyone's trying to republicize. Everyone's trying to make their countries ruled by the people, and there was no sense of any sort of natural or otherwise hierarchy. The idea of there being a class of gentlemen and ladies, and that the peasants were supposed to aspire to be like the gentlemen and ladies. There was nothing for people to look up to. There was no superior pressure, so to speak. And so that, and consequently, the idea of communicating hierarchies of heaven or the church or anything became not only foreign to our sensibilities, but repugnant to our sensibilities. What gives that person the right to be above me? What gives that person the right to be above someone else? Like,
right.
All of a sudden you have this uptick in people accusing the Pope or the Church of ultramontanism because oh well, he's just taking some sort of absolute authority of the Church. What gives him the right? And it's like, that wasn't really an issue for a while, because there's a guy at the head of everything. Like, that's just how everything is structured. And so the idea of this this church not ruled by the polity, not ruled by the people, now seems a little archaic, you know?
Yeah.
And so that, I think, was one of the most culturally terrible things for our the world we now live in. I think that was in many ways caused by, or at least marked by, the deposition and then the
murder
of the Romanov family. So that's something I'm super passionate about.
Yeah.
And I've shed a lot of tears about.
I think that's a very astute observation. And again, I won't belabor the point to know we've been going about this for a while. People are probably sick of hearing us talk about boring history things. But I think that, that the murder of the Romanovs is very much the coda on the end of World War I, which destroyed that whole ancient order. And I do have to say that years ago I read about, some of this, and obviously I don't know it as well as you do. But I think that the murder of the Romanovs and their children in the basement of some building in some random city is one of the most horrific things I think has ever happened in the world.
Yeah.
Just reading about it is one of the most horrific things I've ever read about.
Yeah.
Just imagining that is just...
I'm going to give a book recommendation to any of our listeners who want to learn more about this, because, like I said, it's something that, like, you might have heard, 20 minutes on it in history class when you were a kid, but you don't remember. Like, most people don't even know, like, really who the Romanovs were, at least in America. We don't really care a lot of the time. If you want to learn more about this, I recommend the book Race to Save the Romanovs. I do not remember who wrote it, but it's one of the better and really more comprehensive history texts that I've read. Also, the only book I can bring myself to actually take notes in. So, like, that's
saying something.
Yeah, that's a P for both of us. Like, we want to take notes in books, but we really don't want to mark up the book. It looks so nice. It's the only one I brought myself to actually, like, take a bunch of notes in and actually reference back to, because it's something I wanted to really dive deep into. But Race to Save the Romanovs is a great book, very informative. Even if you only read, like, the first few chapters of it, it's really very informative to, like, what was going on at the time in a very deep sense. Would you like a topic?
Sure. We could do something on the lighter side if you want to. We can get back to the heavy history later.
Yeah. So for those of you who are just joining us, we just spent a full hour talking about why Pope Pius XII being called Hitler's Pope is utter nonsense, and why the death of the Romanov family is one of the most culturally significant moments in modern history. So, the natural thing for us to springboard into from that is Scrappy Doo. Tell me about Scrappy Doo.
Oh my gosh, Scrappy Doo. So, yeah. So
this is what this episode was supposed to be originally. Was like,
yeah,
it's
exactly.
just lighthearted stuff.
So yeah, I mean that was the original prompt, just random things that you could talk about, and Scrappy Doo was actually something you threw out, like, yeah, I don't know, maybe you could talk about something like Scrappy Doo or something. I'm like, you know what? I will talk about Scrappy Doo.
Because you talked to me about this before, and like both of us watched a lot of Scooby Doo growing up, but like you did like a deep dive into it like a year or two ago, and you realized something about Scrappy Doo that like I did not have the clarity of memory to really parse out until I really thought about it. I went, oh dang, you're right.
Yeah.
So yeah, Scrappy Doo. Tell me about Scrappy Doo.
So okay, so just to give a little Scooby Doo background, right? So I've been aware of Scooby Doo as long as I've been alive. It was probably like the first show, the first thing that I really got super into that I can remember. Like they used to run reruns of the original 1969 Scooby Doo, Where Are You? On Cartoon Network all the time when I was a kid. So I watched like the OG, and loved it. And, I caught bits and pieces of other shows, like the new Scooby-Doo movies, where they were with all the celebrities way back when, or like some of the Scooby-Doo show. Obviously, the movies, like the Zombie Island and all the classics, What's New Scooby-Doo and all that. But I never really watched Scooby-Doo in its entirety. I was aware of Scrappy Doo because I saw like the movies, like the Boo Brothers, the Reluctant Werewolf. There's one other one, Cool School. And then also like bits and pieces of, I think, like the new Scooby-Doo Mystery, one of the 80s shows. But then of course you have the 2002 Scooby-Doo movie, the live action one, where part of the plot is that Scrappy is evil, and
he's ultimately the villain. Now here's the thing. That's spoiling the end of the movie, but who cares? It was a bad movie.
It's a terrible movie.
Like,
the second one's fantastic.
The second one's great. Like,
the first one sucks.
The second one, made by the same people, with the same cast, with the same screenwriters. Fantastic movie. Fantastic love letter to Scooby-Doo in the days of yore. Following the first one, which was really a
weird
parody and like really just all around not a good time. Don't watch the first one. Watch the second one.
But the first one, I think, really kind of started solidifying this idea in the minds of the populace that Scrappy Doo is the worst. Scrappy ruined Scooby-Doo. He was an unnecessary addition.
He was the jump the shark moment.
Exactly. And like that's something that is stuck in the very psyche of Scooby-Doo, even because they're still making movies up until this day. Like he has not shown up again. I think there was like a cameo passing reference to Scrappy Doo in like the Mystery Incorporated series. Yeah. They literally did a sequel to the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo back from the late 80s. And they brought back Flim Flam, who was a side character nobody liked, but they completely ignored Scrappy Doo, which makes no sense. But yeah, like he is anathema to the Scooby Doo lore up until this day. Like he cannot be included because everyone hates him. That's just what everyone accepts. So a couple of years ago, I went back and I rewatched as much Scooby Doo as I could stomach, which was everything up through What's New Scooby Doo. I was just by that point, I'm like, all right, I need a break. So I watched
the
like
Scooby Doo
all
series
of the shows
with the greatest theme song.
Oh yeah, the Simple Plan.
Simple Plan did a great job at that theme song.
Like, there's this one Scooby-Doo theme song montage on YouTube, which goes through like each one every year, and then the last theme song before that is the pup named Scooby-Doo. And I like a pup named Scooby-Doo. It's different. It's got some things that I'm kind of about, but it's got a decent enough theme song. But having that end and then immediately going into the guitar riff at the beginning of the What's New Scooby-Doo theme song, it's like, you didn't stand a chance. There's no way you could have sounded like, I'm sorry, it's just an inferior theme song.
I'm trying to imagine that the Scooby-Doo, where are you? Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Doo! Yeah, literally that.
Coming after you.
Night and day. But anyway, so I went through and I watched like all the series. So Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Scooby-Doo Show, Scooby and Scrappy Doo, New Scooby-Doo Mysteries, the one where it's just Daphne back for some reason, Pup Named Scooby-Doo, What's New Scooby-Doo, like all of that. And I made a realization that Scrappy Doo's fine. I don't understand what everyone hates Scrappy Doo. He literally, like, I don't like the Scooby-Doo show, which was like a mid to late 70s, basically the same thing as Scooby-Doo Where Are You, but they just kept going for another 3 seasons. And yeah, it gets old. Like they're rehashing similar plot lines. I mean, you can only do so much with Let's Unmask the Villain. They're literally up to the point where they're reusing character assets from 1969. Yeah. Like remember the zombie and the witch episode in the Bayou? They literally bring that zombie back in the new Scooby-Doo show as like a different colored zombie. And it's like, that's the same zombie. Like, I'm just not, you're taking me out of this. But, that was the Xerox era where they're just kind of using, copy and, they're not trying anymore by 3 seasons of that. Or the one where I think that might be a different version. I won't get to that. But anyway, so after that, they realized Scooby-Doo, like like Hanna-Barbera in the late 70s realized, all right, Scooby-Doo's fallen off. We need something to revitalize it.
Right.
And their solution to that, let's add Scooby-Doo's nephew, Scrappy Doo. And Scrappy Doo is kind of like the exact opposite of Scooby. He's like this little Scrappy. That's why obviously his name's Scrappy. Like he's a little Scrappy. Let me at him. Wants to fight everybody. And they have like one season of him with the gang, and he basically becomes kind of the central character next to Scooby and Shaggy. So the gang kind of becomes extraneous. They get rid of the gang for the next series. It's just him, Scooby, and Shaggy. And, there's the Scooby Scrappy Doo show is weird because they start to get out of the even solving monsters in general. They're just doing things. That's just a weird concept. But then they get back into doing it in like mysteries and monsters and stuff. And he's fine. Like he's kind of silly. He's the exact opposite of them. So he's a good foil to Scooby and Shaggy, always dragging them back into the fight. And, he's a perfectly fine addition to a show. And in many ways, he saved the show. I mean, like, people weren't interested in Scooby-Doo anymore. Then Scrappy comes in, and suddenly they're getting the ratings are coming back. And then he stays as part of the show throughout most of the 80s. Daphne comes back to add a different perspective in there. He's still there. And, he's smart. He's intelligent. He's the one who really is figuring things out. He's taking up the role that, like, Fred and Velma usually fit into. So, yeah, and then, the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo comes in. They throw Flim Flam in there for some reason, who's just this kid who is like a huckster who follows them around after he meets them in a German village in the Himalayas that Shaggy crashed a plane at or something.
Yeah, that's my favorite part.
A trip, that show.
Shaggy is a pilot.
Like, the Scooby-Doo plane, and then they crash in the Himalayas.
I remember watching that as a kid and being like, I might be like 7, but this doesn't add up.
Yeah, as you do. But yeah, so again, that's just all to say, like, he hasn't been in a show besides that movie since the Scooby-Doo live action movie since like 1986 or 87 or whatever, or 88 or 89, I think was the last movie, like the Reluctant Werewolf or whatever it was. And then he's just been gone. But he's become like this rallying point about everything bad with Scooby-Doo, and I don't understand that because he literally saved the series.
At what point in this timeline? Because I think part of the reason why, for us, retrospectively, like, we can only look back on these old shows as things that aired before we were alive. And so we associate Scooby-Doo with being part of when Scooby-Doo was worse than the early days of Scooby-Doo Where Are You? But there's a whole timeline, and he kind of gets lost in there. At what point in this timeline is Scooby-Dumb?
Oh, Scooby-Dumb was a Scooby-Doo show in 1976, 77.
So when we say, like, people always talk about, like, Scrappy Doo being the mascot of the jumping of the shark. With Scooby-Doo.
I can't stand Scooby-Dumb. He's
Scooby-Dumb
the worst.
is like how many years before Scrappy-Doo? Because like
4 or 5 or something.
Yeah, so it's like several years before that we had Scooby-Dumb. Scooby-Dumb is Scooby's cousin, I want to say.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, his stupid redneck cousin.
Yeah, his stupid redneck cousin, whose entire job is just to go "duh," like all the time, and like, like, and so this is a great episode. So Scooby-Dumb is like this like really cheap shot humor, one note joke that is with the series for way longer than he should be, and so like. We already the series is already dead. Like, it will be revitalized eventually, but right now, dead in the water.
Yeah.
Like, Scrappy-Doo was a fine thing that came into a already dead show Is that
I think
what
you have
you're
to
positing?
understand. Yeah, yes, exactly. Like the thing you have to understand about Scooby-Doo is you have all of the tropes that you associate with Scooby-Doo. Velma saying Jinkies, Daphne saying Jeepers, Velma being the smart one all the time,
Fred and his
Fred being the
traps.
dumb trap guy, Scooby and Shaggy
dumb
just
originally.
being...
That's the thing
I'm
that bothers
getting
me.
I'm getting to that.
Yeah.
I'm getting to that. Yeah, exactly. Because you're right, and this is
Yeah.
another thing that bugs me. Like, so yeah, Scooby and Shaggy are just the dumb, scared guys all the time who never want to do anything. They just want to go hide and eat.
Yeah.
We think of all
To
these things as
unhinge their
staples.
jaws to eat sandwiches that are that big that they made by shuffling bread and meat into a pile.
Yes, exactly. I think was that Zombie Island. I think they did that in Zombie Island.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, like if we think about all these things that are just Scooby-Doo tropes, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Doesn't lean into those as much. Meddling Kids doesn't even come into it super often. Like
Yeah, a
it
few
had all
times.
of that. Yeah, like Velma's obviously the smart one, but like sometimes Fred figures it out. Sometimes Shaggy figures it out. You
Yeah.
know, like or Shaggy catches on, or sometimes Shaggy willingly goes along, even though he's always kind of the skittish one. So they feel a little less tropey and just a little more human in Scooby-Doo,
Yeah.
Where Are You? Then Scooby-Doo show comes in, and the budget's probably less, and they're just kind of this is the Hanna-Barbera just throw crap at the fan and see what
Right,
sticks.
they got new writers, so it's all right,
yeah.
well, what is the one-word synopsis of each of these characters? 'Cause-
Exactly, and that's
Yeah.
their entire character now.
Yeah.
And yeah, Scooby-Doo show over 3 years, which a lot more episodes than Scooby-Doo Where Are You ever was. Really starts leaning into all of that, and this is when you start kind of getting like we need to do something new. Oh, let's get Scooby Dumb in here, or or that Scooby D, who is sometimes their cousin, sometimes not, sometimes love interest, sometimes not. Very, very
Yeah.
weird.
I mean, they're dogs.
And very creepy.
Yeah.
Scooby D is a very creepy character. But yeah, like you start to get into this where it just becomes so rote and so boring and so unoriginal that yeah, by the time Scrappy comes around, it's a dead show where they need to kind of drag Scrappy or kind of not drag Scrappy into it, but create a character of Scrappy who is a breath of fresh air because he is different in that he's part of Scooby's lineage, but he wants to fight. He wants to let me at him. Like none of the other cast wants to fight the ghost. That's just a
Yeah.
silly thing. He's a kid or like I don't know how he's supposed to be, but he's young.
Yeah.
And then Scooby's now in this role where he has to be Uncle Scooby and has to like run away, but then come back and get Scrappy and drag him off because he doesn't want to go with them. And yeah, like that, I think that's a novel idea to throw into a show to keep doing the same types of things that you want to do without it feeling like you're just rehashing the same concept over and over again. And I think he works. I remember I was watching Scooby-Doo Boo Brothers, the movie, and Scrappy's trying to figure everything out, and it's just like, wow, it's cool to have him trying to figure everything out. Well, they don't want
Yeah.
to be here at all. Like I just love the interplay between the three of them. I think it works really well when now you don't have a cast of 5, you have a cast of 3, and everyone has their role, and I don't know, it just feels more natural.
Right. From a writing perspective, it's just better.
Yeah.
All right. So, are you
And
ready
then
for the
dumb
most
Fred.
forced Christological parallel of all
Oh
time?
yeah, sure.
Okay. So,
Is it gonna be heretical?
I hope not. So, I'm not gonna say this is true of the entire population at the time, but in a way, this is kind of like the rejection of Christ by the Jews at the time, by the Pharisees, because in a way it's like hey, this is something that you're saying that this guy is everything wrong with the state of Judaism, and so you're rejecting him. You're saying he's a false prophet and he's a blasphemer and everything. But really, he's a good thing. The first good thing this has seen for a while for something that is otherwise dying.
Yeah.
It's just that you don't want to admit that it's already dead, and so you're going to point to him and say, oh, well, he's everything wrong with it. It's like, no, he was the good thing within the already dying corpse,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, people just kind of miss that.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the dumb Fred thing, so now I have to talk about that
Yes,
too for a
please.
second.
I'm going to say real quick before you do.
Yeah.
So we have these listeners and viewers, I suppose, who are
Well, we have less than we did before now that we've done all of this, but
Right. But they come here, they're looking for a good like Catholic discussion and everything. And they're just tuning in, and they've gotten like 20 minutes of us talking about Scooby Doo for a while with like great energy. And on the one hand, I'm like, "Oh man, are our listeners gonna like tune out for this? What if hypothetically we get a whole slew of new listeners who were like, finally, someone's talking about this. Bring back the Scooby, and we end up doing like a whole side series just talking about Scooby Doo lore."
This is a Scooby channel now.
Like,
that would be hilarious. Like you have like the Star Wars lore channels. It's like we're a Scooby Doo lore channel.
yeah, we'd be Scooby Doo theory.
Scooby Doo theory.
Anyway,
oh, man.
So Fred being dumb.
Yeah. Okay. So Fred Jones, growing up, he was like my character. I love Fred so much.
Fred's
he was
great.
Like whenever I was like pretending to play Scooby Doo with my friends, I would want to be Fred because he was just awesome.
He's cool. He's smart and cunning. He can bench press 220. That's like everybody. He's the guy that everyone wants to be. You know.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's who Johnny Bravo thinks he is.
Exactly. The thing about Fred is, in the original show, he was the competent leader who. Him and Velma and Daphne helped sometimes. Were the ones who really figured everything out and really figured out what was going on and solved the mysteries. Then, at some point, we decided we needed him to be not that. So, what Pup's named Scooby Doo happens
because Velma was that now.
Because
again, was that she was the brains of the operation. Yeah. You can't have two brains of the operation.
We're leaning so hard into the tropes of the characters at this point. So, in Pup Named Scooby Doo, you have Velma who. She's kind of a jerk because she's so smart and she's all better than everybody.
She's Sheldon Cooper.
Yeah, exactly. And then Daphne is I'm rich and pretty and I hate gross stuff. And Shaggy and Scooby are Shaggy and Scooby. Yeah. Shaggy's still voiced by Casey Kasem because of course he is. And Don Messick, I think, was still doing Scooby.
Yeah.
Fred. This is the one thing Frank Welker didn't come out to do Fred. But yeah,
he really could have saved it.
He could have. But then Fred is just the idiot kid who always thinks Red Herring did everything. He doesn't understand what's going on in any of these things. He's not solving any of the mysteries. It's, must be Red Herring because I hate him. And that's his whole character says he's an idiot. And like then the late 90s movies came out and they went back to regular Fred. Like I think peak Fred is Zombie Island,
completely
obviously.
Forgot about Red Herring.
Yeah, Red Herring. Except the one time he didn't say it was Red Herring, it was Red Herring. So
I'm just gonna say a complete side note that that for our viewers who are looking at me continually, like frequently sipping this, no, this is not whiskey. This is cold brew tea. So I don't want you worrying about me as chugging whiskey at noon.
Well, they don't know what time it is. But yeah. So Pup Named Scooby Doo created Dumb Fred. The late 90s movies had regular Fred, because I think Zombie Island's peak Fred. I mean, he's just the man, you know, as Fred is. And then, as much as I love it, What's New Scooby Doo went back into the Dumb Fred kind of, not so bad. Like I rewatched it recently, and he's not bad.
As bad as Pup Named Scooby Doo.
Yeah, but like he's still kind of
he's
like
not what he used to be.
Right, and that's just a standard, I think, Fred now. I haven't seen a lot of the newer stuff, so maybe I'm wrong, but I think Mystery Incorporated still kind of had a bit. He's a trap fanatic. But so that's Fred now. Apparently, he's dumb, or not dumb, but he's a little.
And then there's the Velma series that we don't acknowledge at all.
No, that doesn't exist.
Yeah,
which Frank Welker also didn't do Fred for. So
shockingly. All right, he looked at that script and he's like, "Look how they massacred my boy."
Man's literally been doing Fred since 1969. I have nothing but respect for him. When he's not around anymore, I will be very sad.
When he's not around anymore, they should just stop doing the series.
I agree.
Yeah. All right. So thank you very much for the education on Scooby Doo and Scrappy Doo and how Scrappy Doo actually wasn't that bad. Do you have anything else you want to expand on with that, or should we move on to another topic?
I don't think so. We can move on to another topic. I'm just taking a look back at our list of topics.
All right. Hit me with your best shot. I don't even remember why I sent you.
Yeah.
So for those
Okay.
who are
Oh,
just
yeah, yeah.
tuning in, what we're doing is we sent each other topics that we feel like we can talk about, quote unquote, for 5 minutes or so.
Yes.
Each one is taking a half hour, but we're just sort of rolling with it. So
We're gonna be here a while.
so we're just sort of firing them at each other. Oh, you said you could talk about this. Tell me about that. So yeah.
So while we're sticking with the more lighthearted things, explain to me what movies get wrong about guns and archery.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm gonna
I
start with
know this
archery.
bugs you.
We're gonna go in chronological order. I'm gonna start with archery. So, archery. One of the things in this includes movies that I love, such as Lord of the Rings. Side note, just because we talked about Lord of the Rings a lot on this podcast, and I feel the need to address this. I have said multiple times when we talk about the idea of whether or not you should consume a certain piece of art depends on the art, depends on the intent of the artist, and it depends on your personal proclivities and vulnerabilities as a consumer. And I've said, for instance, I always say everybody should consume Lord of the Rings, but maybe that's not true. Maybe you're going to read Lord of the Rings and be like, I want to go chop people's heads off, in which case you shouldn't consume Lord of the Rings. I realized recently that's really mainly true for the movies, because granted, you might be able to find some bad in the books, but you're really going to have to try. But the movies, because they are taking on books that have a lot of battle sequences, they have a lot of battle sequences, and it's movie. Like, the film medium is built for that, and so you lean into that. The books don't really go into that as gruesomely, It's like
It's like Game of Thrones, Like I've been reading Game of Thrones, and there's some explicit things about it, but it's like you're not watching people have sex, because that's just not. You can't really translate that as well. I mean, I guess you can, but the book doesn't translate that in the same way the HBO went and ran with it.
Right. So so Lord of the Rings, it's like the books, even in the battle sequences, most of what you're seeing is the honor and valor of the people who are fighting. Like, you're not really seeing the combat, because it's a book. It's like writing combat's very difficult. Whereas if you're writing, there's a battle going on, you give a brief description of what's going on so that you can see how this person responds to it with this great sense of honor and duty. It's like, that's really what you're being exposed to in the battle sequences. You're only being exposed to very wholesome things. It's actually the most wholesome combat can be. So yeah, just so that I'm not needlessly slandering Lord of the Rings, because I think it's actually I'm not giving it a fair shake if I say oh, well, you might consume that, and a lot of people will react this way. The movies, because they're movies, not even because they're bad, just because they're films.
Just the consequence of the medium.
Right. So, but anyway, so something that movies, including Lord of the Rings, get wrong about archery. With the dawn of firearms, something that came about a lot is that, if there's a potential threat, keep your gun trained on him, because if he makes any wrong move, I want you to shoot him, just to keep someone at bay. You can't do that with a bow and arrow.
No, you cannot.
You know why? Because
especially a longbow.
It's freaking heavy.
Yeah.
So the draw weight, particularly you could potentially do that with some compound bows. Compound bows are not what people are doing this with, and even that, it's difficult if you're talking about a hunting bow. But you have different draw weights for different purposes. But an old English longbow, which is most of what these people are using in these movies, it's that's anywhere from 70 to 100 pounds of yanking.
Yeah.
And you're telling me that you're holding that weight this entire time during this entire 5-minute conversation with this person. You are holding collectively 50 pounds on each end apart from each other. This is 100 pounds of force that you are just absorbing into your shoulders and forearms. That's not how this works. You can't actually just keep someone at bay for more than a few seconds, because most of how it worked was that you would really yank it, and then boom, as soon as you got it back, you were trying to aim as you're getting it back, and then release. The other thing that they get wrong, there's a lot more that they get wrong in terms of guns, but I'm going with archery right now. The other thing they get wrong is fire. Nobody said fire until firearms, because it was you're ordered to notch an arrow, to draw, and release or loose.
See, you say that, but I'm pretty sure Elrond said fire, and he was there 3,000 years ago.
So here's the thing. Okay, I've heard this. Okay, you know the YouTuber Lindy Beige?
Yeah.
Okay, so Lindy Beige, Lindy Beige, for those of you who don't know, he is this English gentleman who rants about things on YouTube of various natures. He has a background in evolutionary psychology or something like that. And yet most of what he does videos on, or did videos on back in the day, he does a wider variety now. He still makes them, but most of what people go to his channel for he's going to talk about medieval weaponry.
Right.
And one of the things that he said was a peeve of his in Lord of the Rings was that Aragorn said fire. And here's the thing. Aragorn did not say fire. First of all, he was speaking Elvish. And so no, he did not say fire. And second of all, he said release. He actually got it correct. I don't remember what Elrond said. He might have said fire in Elvish. I don't know.
He said it in Elvish. I don't remember what the subtitle was.
But yeah, everyone thinks of it as fire. But like a lot of time, it's a like ready, aim, fire. You don't yell fire if there's no fire involved. Like,
what if you have a flaming arrow?
Because that's actually
Greek
kind
fire.
of that's actually kind of another thing. Flaming arrows, not really much of a thing. Because it's like, imagine lighting a candle and then throwing the candle. What's going to happen? I was watching Mask of Zorro with my wife, and there's this one part where like someone knocks over a candle and it like flies across the room onto this curtain, and the curtain, which was apparently dipped in kerosene every night, just combusts and the entire house burns down. And I'm like, that's not how candles work. If you threw a candle across the room, what would happen?
Yep,
physics happened to it.
Yeah, man.
And so same thing with an arrow. If that arrow's flying at a great velocity, that flame's not going to be sustained.
It's like how you shoot a gas tank and the car blows up.
Right. Well,
the Mythbusters literally unloaded like an entire assault weapon into a car gas tank, and nothing happens.
Right. What was I gonna say? So, the idea of the flaming arrow, there was some credence to it, but it was really you had something that had something in the tip that was like this sort of pitch-like, very hot substance that would burn something, so you could fire it into a pile of straw or whatever else you'd jump into in Assassin's Creed, and it would catch fire. And that was the idea, was that we need something that, like, as it flies through the air, the extra oxygen will actually make it burn more, rather than something that's flaming at the beginning and then poofs out,
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a thing. Not really much of a thing, but it was a thing. But that's another thing that people get wrong about archery a lot of the time. All right, so the thing that I firearms in movies and TV. This is one of those areas where, like, it's knowing about firearms or knowing about history will ruin a lot of movies for you, because you're really taken out of the moment a lot. Yeah. And one of the things, and I don't really blame the script writers for this in many cases. I don't really blame the armorers on the set for it. I really blame the sound effects people. Is what are most of those noises? Yeah. Like, the amount of times, there's always a or a click or a like whatever. The amount of times that, like, someone's holding a gun to somebody's head, and then they like move, and they like move their gun really quick, and it does another it makes another click sound. It's like, what was that? Like, what precisely was that? And people who don't know much about firearms will be like, oh, well, he took the safety off. I'm like, okay, first of all, if you're holding a gun to someone's head, the safety should already be off if you're trying to, like, threaten to shoot this person.
Yeah.
Second of all, safeties don't make that noise. And, like, if your safety is making that noise, do not fire that gun. Like, that gun is malfunctioning. And second of all, people say like, oh, maybe it's just like the components of the gun like rattling. I'm like, again, if your gun is that loose, do not fire that gun. You will injure yourself more than you'll injure your target. Like,
if I moved my Glock like that and I heard or some sort of sound, I'd be like, what?
I'd be like, well, I'm putting that down.
Yeah.
My favorite was Jess and I were watching The Man in the High Castle. Fantastic series for anyone who's looking for something to watch. Watching The Man in the High Castle. At one point, she asks someone for a gun. For self-protection, and he gives her this revolver, and the important thing to acknowledge is that on a revolver, outside of the trigger, there are functionally, for the user, 2 moving parts. There is the rotating cylinder that contains all of the rounds that will be fired, and there's the hammer, which is exactly what you think it is. Even if you don't know much about guns, you probably know what I'm talking about. The thing that is like pulled back to then send the firing pin into the round to eject the cartridge, right? So, or eject the round rather. So, a shrouded hammer revolver is exactly what it sounds like. It is a revolver where the hammer is not visible, touchable, anything. To move the hammer, you have to pull the trigger. And why is that a thing? It's because this is made for carrying, and a bunch of police at the time started to realize that their revolvers that had the hammers on them, they realized that when they were trying to draw it, it would snag on their clothing or on their like suspenders or something like that. And so they say, can we get like a shrouded hammer for this so that it's smooth, so that it draws cleanly, so that we're not like accidentally like shooting our foot, you know?
Yeah.
Which also skill issue if you're shooting your foot. But in any case, she at one point, someone's knocking on her door, someone's outside, and she doesn't know who it is, and so she grabs that shrouded hammer revolver, and she kind of like goes like this, like it's off screen. She's kind of like backing up to the wall, but like off screen is the gun, and you hear a and I'm like, there's literally nothing that she could have moved there. Like,
yeah.
The only thing she's able to move is the trigger. So if you're hearing any mechanics clinking or clicking, that means that she's shooting the floor right now. And that just bothers me. So yeah, that's a shorter topic, but
yeah,
there you go.
Makes me think of that one. I don't know if did you see the was it Gus Johnson sketch on YouTube where he's got the shotgun and he keeps racking it and stuff just keeps coming out.
Yeah. You best get to stepping. So he's just ejecting a bunch of shells.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. All right. Let me pull up your list. All right. So what do we have? We already did Pope Pius the 12th and Scrappy Doo.
And Scrappy Doo. So.
All right. So, all right. Movies don't bother to get Christianity right.
Okay, this is kind of a very good segue from what you were saying, where movies don't bother to do the research about guns.
Yes.
And bows. Movies don't bother to do the research about Christianity, and it frustrates me. You know, like the same way you were saying, like if you know anything about history or firearms, like your suspension of disbelief will be broken. If you know anything about like Christianity or Catholicism, your suspension of disbelief will be broken because, like, I just don't understand it. Because as somebody who likes to write, like if I was writing about something that happened in real life, I would want to do my due diligence to make sure that I am accurately portraying the thing that I'm writing about. You know, like if it's historical fiction, you know, I'd like to make sure that I know, hey, in 15th century Venice, this is what society was like. So these are the terminology I'm using, or these are the things I'm talking about. Like I wouldn't want it to feel like out of place to somebody who knows about that.
It's a very interesting, very particular choice of example there, because you're saying, oh, if I were in like, what was it, 15th century Venice or whatever, I'd want to make sure that I'm really researching what the culture was at the time, because the first thing that I thought of was Shylock the money-lending Jew. Like,
okay.
Like, but like that is, again, like 15th, 16th century Venice, and it's this is somebody that said, I'm not really going to research any of like
Right.
what is this
Yeah.
culture? I'm just going to go off of what have people told me about the culture.
Right.
You know,
But
who
I think
don't like the culture.
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, that is. I just picked that because that's like the one historical fiction anything that I've written is like took place in that time, so that's why it came to mind. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's something like that. You know, the idea of if you're going to write about something realistic, I feel like you owe it to the reader or the viewer or whatever as a writer to do your due diligence to make sure you're accurately portraying the thing. You know,
Yeah.
like how many times have we seen movies where there's a mass or a priest and they just do or say things that just don't make any sense?
Yeah.
You know, like I remember the Jack Ryan series. They had a scene where a terrorist attack is perpetrated inside a Catholic funeral mass, but the ordering of the mass was like you had the Our Father and then this prayer, and it's like, wait, that's not how mass goes. Like it's just you clearly have never been to a mass. You have no idea how to construct one. It's just these are religious people doing vaguely religious things.
And it's probably somebody who's like, oh, I've had some vague exposure. I went to a Catholic wedding once. I know that these are prayers that they say. And otherwise, their exposure to Christianity is kind of we do whatever in whatever order. And so they go, oh, we want this to be a Christian service, but I'm going to involve Catholic elements in that service.
Right.
And they don't realize, no, there's a very strict order within
Catholic is very
that these have to happen.
Yeah, and again, we're the not the minority because we're the majority of Christianity, but like especially in American culture, our understanding of Christianity is something that people understand as well. So yeah, you know, in a Protestant culture where it's a lot more fluid, and I can understand how people would assume that, but still, you would think that people would try to want to do their due diligence. You know, like Father Mike released a video where he was reacting to a bunch of like confession scenes in different movies, and just what things they got right, things they got wrong, and you know, there's certain little ticks where he's just like, "What's up with that?" Like the priest kept saying like "my child" or "my son," and it's like Father Mike's just kind of like, "I've never done that. Like that's kind of weird to me. I don't know how I feel about that." And it's like, yeah, like I've never heard a priest say that to me. I mean, maybe priests do, you know, but that's just kind of the understanding that that's the way the priest would talk, you know, right. Or the confession is somewhere where you just kind of, as Shameless Coglin once put it in a Freedom Tunes sketch, you know, confessions where vaguely Catholic characters come to exposition or something like that. And yeah, it's true, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a pet peeve of mine. We don't have to go super off the rails with it, but I just wish people.
I'm going to give one example where I'm like, dude, they really did their research here. Okay, so there was a show. What was it called? Oh my gosh. Was it just called Touch? It might have just been called Touch. All right, so there's this series in which essentially there's this kid, he's nonverbal, he's like 12, 13 years old. And he's like a deeply autistic child. And his father has never heard him speak. He doesn't like to be touched. It was called Touch because the whole thing was like he doesn't touch his dad at all. And so he's like trying to help his son, but his son can't speak to him, will not physically interact with him. All he does is he just gets notebooks after notebooks and he's writing down numbers in a seemingly random order. He's obsessed with numbers. And little does he realize up until the first episode that the father realizes Kiefer Sutherland plays the father, and he realizes that what his son is taking note of is that he sees the pattern of the universe. He sees how everything is connected, how everything touches, and so it becomes Kiefer Sutherland's life now that I don't remember his name in the series, so I'm just going to keep saying Kiefer Sutherland. Kiefer Sutherland's life now,
Jack,
is that Jack is back. So Kiefer Sutherland's entire life becomes his way to connect with his son is to follow the clues that his son is leaving. Because his son's able to see how everything needs to connect, and he needs to enable it in some way in order for things to work out the way they're supposed to work out. There are these religious sects within this series that view these children, because there's not just him, there are like other children like this that view them as prophets, that they're able to predict everything in a way, and so they view them in that way. And there's this one guy that is a Catholic serial killer, because he believes that no, there's a false prophecy happening here. This is numerology. This is something that like is condemned or whatever. and so he thinks it's his mission. He was actually he's like a laicized priest. And he thinks it's his mission in life. He's compelled by God to remove these people from the world, and so he goes around killing these people. And he goes into confession because this is where vaguely Catholic characters go to exposit exposition. And so he goes into confession, and he confesses to the priest that he has murdered. And the priest goes, which is like the one thing that's like, all right, come on, like the priest has heard this before. I was running a youth group back in the day, and I stopped into this religious ed class one time, what we used to call CCD. Some people still do call it CCD. We used to call it catechism. But I would always stop in just to see, like, all right, what is not being covered by the curriculum that I should, like, fill in a little bit, because that'll make my job a lot easier. And so one of the things was they're having their, like, semi-annual confession for the religious ed kids. And I went in and I was like, hey, just so you know, like, there's nothing to be afraid of here. I was like, I am not asking you to do anything that I would not willingly and happily do. I'm actually going to be going to confession alongside you. Which, one, was a chance for me to go to confession. But two, it was no, I want to show the kids, like, hey, this isn't just something that we're making kids do. Like, I, an adult, am also doing this, and I'm so happy to be doing it. And I told them, I was like, the other thing is that you don't have to be worried about, like, oh, like, is the priest going to be, like, scandalized if I tell him, like, what I've done wrong or anything like that. I was like, to be real with you guys, your tea is not the best tea he's heard. Like, these priests hear confessions in prison. They've heard way worse. A lot of the time, like, even the worst middle schooler's confession is going to be compared to what they heard before. And I was talking about the seal of confession. I was like, they are bound to not tell. And I told the story of what's his name, which saint. There was one confessor that he was put to death because he would not reveal to the king whether or not the queen had confessed adultery. And I was like, that is what every priest is bound to do if they are compelled to tell what you have said in confession. Well, then you're gonna have to kill me, because I'm not telling anything. And I said, and if they do, they are automatically excommunicated. It's an excommunicable offense. And I explained what that meant. And the one girl goes, okay, but, like, what if they, like, secretly tell somebody, and they, like, never find out, and they never, like publicly repent of it? And I was like, oh, they go to hell. She was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But the religious ed teacher, who I thought was generally pretty well versed in Catholicism, but she says, would you like to go over the kids, like, what the exceptions are? I was like, what? She was like, the exceptions to the seal of confession.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not following. And she was like, can you go over, like, what sins the priest has to tell people? And I was like, there aren't any. It's the seal of confession. She was like, well, what about murder? I was like, yeah. Like, if someone confesses murder, the priest has to keep that to himself. It's not between him and that guy. It's between the God that has made that guy and that guy. He was just the vessel. Like, he has no place to tell this. And she was like, oh, I didn't realize that. I always thought he would, like, tell people. But that is actually the central conundrum here, is that this guy goes to the priest and he's like, I've committed murders, several, and he says, and there will be more. And the priest says, I can't give you absolution if you do not have repentance. That's not how this works. He says, I'm sorry, I cannot absolve you of your sins because you are planning to do it again. I can only absolve you if you are willing to detach yourself from the sin. And this guy who's a religious zealot, essentially is, like, trying to, like he's just stalking this priest, being like, give me absolution. I need absolution, because he can't live with himself otherwise. He has this, like, for a murderer, terribly scrupulous conscience. And and he's like, give me absolution. I need absolution. And the priest is in this difficult place of, okay, well, the seal of confession means I can't tell what he has done, but he said within confession that he's planning on doing it again. Yeah. So can I or can't I tell the authorities, hey, this guy told me he's planning to murder somebody, and and um and ultimately the serial killer guy ends up killing the priest because he's like, I can't have you stopping my mission. But I was like, I really appreciate how well researched that was.
Yeah.
That was like, dang, you guys really went into it. Like, you're like, oh, we're gonna have a Catholic serial killer who's compelled by a misunderstanding of his Catholicism to kill these people. And they're like, if we're gonna do that, we really, really got to get into the weeds of this. Like, what is the moral conundrum based on his Catholicism? So I really appreciated that. That was really well done.
I just wish more movies did that. Like, the movie Conclave, which just came out. Part of that movie is that they're obviously trying to elect a new pope, and in one part you have a religious sister who in the past had an affair with one of the cardinals who's might become the pope, and she hasn't told anyone, but clearly there's something going on. So Ray Fiennes' character,
Cardinal Ray Fiennes,
who's Cardinal Ray Fiennes, has her go to confession, and then afterwards goes to that cardinal and tells him, "Look, this is what I know now." Right. And I remember seeing that. I'm like, "Yep, okay, he's excommunicated. He is out of the church.
Yep,
he's done.
He's no longer a cardinal, no longer a bishop. He's just excommunicated. Then that's that." Yeah.
One other thing, as we're talking about, the way that confession specifically is treated, and why and how people think, because mainly in movies, that the priest is going to be like so freaked out by the thing that they say. Because I think Father Mike noted in some of the scenes he was watching is that like people would confess like sexual sin, and the priest would be like, "Oh my gosh!" It's just like, okay, come on. Yeah. But it reminds me of a joke that Father Augustin Weta told on Pints of Aquinas, like a year ago, where you have this guy, right, and he's committed a murder, and he feels, on his conscience that he needs to be absolved of that. He was raised religious, but really has no concept of it, anymore. But he wants something. So first he goes to like a Lutheran pastor, and he's like, "Pastor, I need to, I killed somebody. I just need to get that off my conscience." And the pastor is kind of like, look, you wait out here on the porch and get my Bible, and then we'll talk about it. We'll figure it out. And the guy says, okay. Yeah. But the pastor goes in, but the guy walks away. He goes to an Anglican minister next, and he's like, Father, if this Anglican minister is being called Father, I did this thing, and I just I can murder somebody, and I just want to be like, I want to confess that. And the Anglican's like, okay, Anglican guy's like, okay, come in, we'll sit down with a cup of tea and we'll talk through this. So he goes in, starts to get the tea ready, but the guy leaves. And, next he goes to a church, has like confessions open, and he goes into the booth, sits down and says, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I've committed murder." And then the priest on the other side of the thing goes, "How many times?" And that's not to say the priests are like don't want to be there, but that's just to say that they have heard it all before, so we shouldn't feel like we're scandalizing them, by coming in with whatever it is that we have.
Right. It's one of the things that I was trying to convey to the kids back in the days. Is like, listen, like it's a number and kind thing. You don't have to go into any detail. You have to go into like, here's what I did, here's how many times I did it, roundabout. The amount of times that I've gone into confession and I'm like, and I cursed like a lot. I don't know. And I will say, by the grace of God, less lately, and I've actually really appreciated that. It's something I'm continually working on. It's a very pernicious vice for me, but but it's something that I actually, by the grace of God, have been getting some sort of assistance with, which is good. But it's one of the things I was conveying to them was like, listen, anything you're going to tell the priest, he's going to be like, yeah, I heard like 8 people say that today. And the day before, I heard another 8 people say it. And last Saturday, I heard a bunch of people say it. Like, if you're like, oh, I don't want I've heard some women in my life, for instance, talk about how there's a comfort in going to an older priest sometimes, particularly when you're struggling with like a sexual sin as a woman, because it feels weird telling a young guy things that you did either with somebody or to yourself sexually, and being like, oh, I feel weird like telling this young strapping lad like what I did, and there's definitely gonna have to be a screen between us. Whereas like the older guys, it feels more like, I've heard some things, he's over it, but it's like, but one of the things that they were saying is like that is just a purely emotional thing for me. Like I that's something that I emotionally struggle with, and yet I objectively have to recognize that even the young guys, yeah, they're hearing this from a bunch of women. It's just kind of old hat by this point, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, sin's boring.
it's boring,
You know,
yeah.
especially when you sit
It's like,
down and say it in confession. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing glamorous about that.
I don't really consume much of Father Ripperger, not because I have any aversion to him. I think he's, so far as my exposure has been, a very good and holy man, but because he's not a figure I follow. One of the things I appreciate about Father Ripperger is that he has said on multiple occasions, like, hey, exorcism just isn't that fascinating. Because that's honestly why I don't consume a lot of stuff, is that a lot of the stuff that is recommended to me, that is pushed of his, is talking about exorcism. I think fascination with exorcism is not healthy.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, no, I'd rather leave that alone. But I don't remember if it was him or Father Lampert. I think it might have been Father Lampert who was saying, but both of them have said similar things. They say, honestly, like, when you tell people that you're an exorcist, they always tell me, like, oh my gosh, have you, like, seen any, like, really crazy things? And I was like, I mean, yeah. And he says, one of the things that people are always disappointed by is you tell them, honestly, the longer you're in exorcism as a ministry, the more you realize the devil's pretty boring. Like, the devil's just kind of a loser. And they say, but that's not to say that exorcism is boring entirely, because the devil part of it's pretty boring, pretty old hat, but the healing power of Christ is fascinating. And that's one of the things I appreciate about them, is that they're not leaning into the celebrity and notoriety of being the known exorcists on the internet. It's like, yeah, I'm an exorcist. I don't really like to talk about it that much. I really just want to talk about how great Christ is.
Yeah.
And that's that. Like, sin is ultimately boring. The devil is ultimately boring. And so, like, yeah, focusing on the healing power of Christ is really what every priest is trying to do. Any priest is worth his salt. And so any sin you're going to confess to the priest, it's boring. He's heard it a bunch of times that day.
Yeah.
And like, there's nothing novel in this. You have not invented a new sin. You're not that clever. And so, like, yeah, the thing that he's there for is and it's possible that he's just, like, emotionally checked out entirely, but if he's emotionally engaged in anything, it's the healing power of Christ, the absolution that is coming through him and his ministry, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, that's a point that Father Brown makes, in the Father Brown books, that the reason why he's such an astute investigator and able to, like, figure out who did this or that, or figure out what people are thinking, is because of his experience in the confessional.
Right.
Where knowing the hearts of men. I think that's even like a discussion he has with Flambeau, before his conversion. Just like,
for those of you who are not familiar with Father Brown, Flambeau is like his Moriarty. Like,
right, yeah, and eventually, after a couple of encounters, Flambeau converts Catholicism, actually, and then becomes, like, a partner of his.
Yeah.
Because he comes to Father Brown, he's trying to be this imposing criminal, and I've done this and that, and Father Brown just kind of like, okay, like, I've known plenty of people who have told me, like, that's what men do. Like, I just know the heart of men, and that doesn't mean you're any farther from redemption.
You're gonna have to go a lot harder than that to scandalize me.
Yeah.
All right, you want to do, like, 2 more, try to quick fire them?
Are we capable of that?
I don't know. Let's find out.
I don't know if we're capable of that, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. All right, hit me. Again, I have no memory of what I sent to you, so this is all coming to me fresh, even though I wrote it like 12 hours ago.
Okay, I don't know how deep this is going to go, but what's the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis?
Oh, the Sapir-Whorf
I have no idea what that is.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so for those of you who are unfamiliar,
is this a quick thing?
So it actually can be. I can make this quick. All right.
Okay.
Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. This is completely unrelated to everything we've talked about. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. For those of you who are unfamiliar,
it sounds like a Star Trek thing. I don't know.
So, for those of you who are unfamiliar, I'm a linguist by training. Like, I do things like this a lot more than I use my linguistics background, but I am a linguist by training. So, linguists, there are a lot of fascinating things within linguistics, but the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is the only thing that anyone talks about.
Okay.
So, like, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, because it's just, like, interesting psychologically. Linguistics goes into many different areas. Like, you have, like, you have the the historical linguistics of how languages came about from other languages. You have the reconstructionists who are essentially saying like, hey, let's try to guess at what Old English sounded like, even though we have no recordings of it, based on the related languages, and things like that. So you have various areas of linguistics. Then you have neurolinguistics, which is like the actual communication between the brain and the speech centers of your brain and how it translates into speech. And then you have the psychological side, for lack of a better term, of linguistics. That's where superior wharf hypothesis comes in. The superior wharf hypothesis. If you want to get into it, watch the movie Arrival with Amy Adams, Jeremy Renner. It's a movie about alien invasion, and it's super chill. Like, it's really fascinating. It's a little intense, but at no point are you like, oh my gosh, something terrible's going on. If you're looking for like a really fascinating film, but that's like really slow paced without losing any dynamism, like Arrival's for you. That's a really good like chill movie night sort of movie.
Okay.
So the superior wharf hypothesis is the hypothesis that the language that you speak influences the way that you think. So, for instance,
Okay.
I'll give I'll give an example of German versus French. Okay, so let's take bridge for instance. So German and French, like many European languages, have grammatical gender. The nouns have genders. They are masculine. They are feminine. In the case of German, they're also neutral. And so that's where in Spanish you have like el versus la, los versus las. And in French you have le versus la. You have der, die, and das in German. So in the German language, the bridge is die Brücke. And in French, it's le pont. And so the difference there is that die Brücke is feminine. Le pont is masculine. And so if you ask a German to describe a bridge, to just imagine a bridge and describe it, they'll normally use very feminine adjectives. They'll say, "Oh, it is curvaceous. It's flowing. It's beautiful. It is ethereal. They'll try to use terms like that. Whereas if you ask a Frenchman to describe a bridge,
it is a handsome bridge. Yeah. They'll be like that. Yeah.
It is phallic. But no, they'll just say like, but the Frenchmen, if you describe a bridge, they'll say it's sturdy, strong, dependable. And so the idea is you're talking about the same thing, but you're used to thinking of this as a feminine or masculine thing just because of the way that your language is structured, right?
That's fascinating because I feel like that's got to be true. Like
Absolutely.
That's got to be definitely a thing.
100%.
But how does that work in English? Because we don't have gendered language in that way.
So we don't have gendered language. We do have other facets. So for instance, so I'll give you one example that seems objective because we're English speakers, but it's actually not. And that's color. Color is a wheel, a spectrum. And yet, if you compare the English language to the Russian language, for us, blue and green are clearly different colors. Like green is what happens when you mix blue and yellow. Whereas to the Russian, there's no word for green or no word for blue, depending on how you look at it. Those are just one color, In other languages, more primitive languages, you have one word for light, one word for dark, one word for red. And that's it. Like anytime that there's a language that only has two descriptions of color, it's always light and dark. Anytime that there is a language that only has three words to describe color, it is light, dark, and red. Always. And it's just something to human psychology that's always like, okay, bright stuff, dark stuff, red stuff, because blood and heat and things like that. And so for us, when I say that to people, oh, well, Russian doesn't have a separate word for blue and green, people go, well, how? like how did they describe the difference? I was like, I don't know. How do we describe the difference between macaroni and banana? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And they go, well, those are two different shades. Exactly.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
we think of them as being different colors. Why? Because we came up with different words for them. Whereas they think of them as different shades because they just didn't differentiate them that way. So we think of something as being totally objective. These are objectively the three primary colors, and these are the secondary colors, you know? Like, that's the system that we came up with to describe something that's actually just a spectrum. We just tried to describe it in very finite terms that, yeah, you have red, yellow, and blue, and if you mix those together in any combination, you get these secondary or tertiary colors, you know?
Yeah.
That is a system that we made up, but because we talk about green and blue as being separate in our language, we can't fathom the idea that people would not separate those, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you know, you say, you give the example of you know, well, we don't have grammatical gender, so how does that work for us? Well, actually, that's part of it, is that we don't have grammatical gender, whereas a lot of languages do. And so, for us, like, why would you, like, how would a bridge be curvaceous, you know? Like, why would you describe it that way? That's a weird way to describe it. Like, we were talking, what is today? Saturday? Yeah, so we were talking literally like 2 days ago about how Jess didn't understand it when I was describing the Walther PPKS, which is the gun that James Bond uses in most of his movies. It's iconically his gun, right? And I said, and don't get me wrong, it's a sexy piece of machinery. And she was like, did you describe a gun as sexy? And I was like, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, not in the same way I describe a person that way, but yeah. But like, she's like, why would you describe a gun as being sexy? Whereas, like, that's not a foreign idea for someone who refers to that as eine Waffe, like, which is a feminine word. Like,
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you're going to use feminine terms for a feminine thing. So, like, we think of, no, things aren't feminine or masculine unless they're people. That is the superior wolf hypothesis. That's a thought that's in our head just because that's how our language is structured. Whereas we just go, no, it's a bloody pencil. Like, why does it have to be? Why does it have to be a man or a woman? You know,
Right, Mr. Pencil.
right?
Yeah.
There is an interesting thing though that that there are some grammatical gender things that are like really unapparent. They're not all natural. So, for instance, diminutives. Think of like someone's named Joseph or Joe, and we call him Joey. That's a diminutive.
Mm-hmm.
It's making something smaller or cuter, like putting E at the end. I'm Tommy, you know? And so, like, in German, you have a couple of those. You have Sien and you have Line. And both of those, if you put those on the end of something, that necessarily makes that thing neutral, grammatically neutral. Which means that the word for girl is neutral, because the word for girl is little maiden, Mädchen. And so you say das Mädchen, and so that is a neutral noun. And so when you're referring to a young girl, you actually say it rather than she. And that is a little bit controversial.
I can imagine.
But that's just the way that the grammar is structured. Whereas for us, no, she is how you refer to a person. He is how you refer to a person. It is how you refer to things. Whereas for other people, they would look at the bridge and say, oh, well, that bridge, like, she's pretty old.
Yeah.
And it is she, because it's a feminine thing, you know? So yeah, things like that. We do that with ships, but
It's true. Yeah.
But yeah, we don't have a lot of other surviving genderings of words. So yeah, that is a fascinating thing, and I think it's interesting
No,
because
that is very interesting.
that has also colored a lot of how I view moral discussions regarding like how we talk about moral things. So, for instance, as a controversial thing, I do not use the term ex-wife or ex-husband when I'm like talking about people who would otherwise be referred to as such, because when I say I don't believe in divorce, when you say you don't believe in divorce, we don't mean we really, really don't like divorce. We mean we don't believe it's a thing. Even if you get legally divorced, you are still married. Like, that is the Christian belief. And so, as inconvenient as it is, and I understand like how difficult this can be for people, but as inconvenient as it is, yeah, no, if you get divorced, that person is still your wife. That person is still your husband, according to Christian belief. And I think the more that we use terms such as ex-wife or ex-husband, the more it legitimizes the position that divorce is real, you know? And that makes things awkward sometimes, that you can't refer to somebody who's someone's second wife as, you can't say like, oh, well, that's your wife. You just have to refer to them by their name, you know? But like, yeah, saying ex-wife, it's a convenient term for an unreal thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like, because even if you say like get legally divorced and then you get your marriage annulled, well, according to the church, that marriage never happened. You were never actually validly married. That's what an annulment is. And so, yeah, I can't even say that person's your ex-wife. That's just your ex-girlfriend, maybe? I don't know. Like,
Sure.
Like, the mother of your children, perhaps? I don't know. Like, best thing is to just learn their name and use their name, you know? But yeah, the more that we use things like that, the more we have a legitimized position. I'll give one more example, and then I'll wrap this topic up and shoot one more your way if you don't mind. So I'll try to pick like a quick one. But
Good luck.
In the German language, there is no word for parent, singular. There's a word for mother, there's a word for father, but you can't say parent. You can only say parents. Like, there's no structure that allows for a singular parent, because parents is a plural. You can't use, there's no neutral term. You have a mother and you have a father. You can't say, oh, well, being a parent, you have to say being a father or being a mother. And that also influences the ways in which they think about family. So, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
You ready for one more?
That's very interesting. You don't necessarily think about it that way, but yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's see.
I don't know if there's any quick ones on there, but
unfortunately, you don't have anything that's like Scrappy Doo that we could have talked about briefly, even though you didn't talk about Scrappy Doo briefly. All right, would you rather talk about Japanese Christianity or the Cathars and the Albigensian Crusade? Or Crusader Kings?
Well, wasn't there one of yours that we missed that kind of goes hand in hand with?
Well, yeah, I was going to talk about like viewing history through the eyes of those who went through it.
Yeah, that's more of a Crusader Kings is more of a annoyance. It's kind of similar to what we were talking about movies about Christianity, anyway, but they went on to do that one.
Okay.
So one of the two, I guess.
Albigensian Crusade, or are we talking about the Cathars and Albigensian Crusade, or the Japanese Christians?
Let's talk about the Cathars, because I think we'll probably do that one.
All right,
breeze through that one pretty quick. So, the Cathars... Okay, so Cathars or Albigensians are two names for the same sect. They're a heresy. However, it's one of those things where it's like, where does a heresy just become a completely different religion?
Yeah.
Because they believed in some things that are similar, because they believed in the gospel, but they also believed that they're Gnostics, right? So they believe that Christ was not incarnate as a man. He only appeared to be appeared to be a man because he's a spiritual being. His spiritual is good and the body is bad, as the Gnostics believe. They're a dualistic movement, and they cropped up in France in the late 12th century, early 13th century, in southern France. That's another interesting thing about France that we don't think about. We just think about France, north, south, that's all France. But back in the Middle Ages, you had northern France, which was very French. Yeah. And you had southern France, which was very not French. Like, they were similar, but the culture was a very different culture, right. So there's a lot of issues between the kings up north, and then the south was a bit more autonomous.
Generally speaking, throughout history, like the modern conception, the modern conceptual understanding of countries is a kind of a modern thing. Like,
Yeah.
you had
Like
kingdoms.
Italy. Italy's
and-
probably the
yeah.
best example of
Yeah.
that because, you had Tuscany, you had Venice, you had Lombardy, you had, the Genoese, you had the Neapolitans, the Naples, Sicilians. Like, there's just so much going on there.
Yeah,
the Romans.
Sicily, like, I've tried to describe Sicily to people, and, like, I'll say, like, oh, they're Sicilian is kind of like somewhere in between Italian and Spanish with, like, a little bit of the, and they go, why? Like, isn't it part of Italy? And I'm like, well,
It's not that simple.
kind of.
The
Like,
Arabs were there. The Normans were there.
It's like, well, at one point it was
French
Greek.
were there.
At one point it was
Yeah, the
Greek. At
Greeks
one
were
point
there.
it was Italian. At one point it was Spanish. At one point it was like that's just that we have a very modern understanding of, like, well, no, these are the countries, and it's like for a long time you really didn't had countries. You had nations and you had empires. Like,
Yeah.
nations were this is this people. Wherever they go, they are that same people. And then you had
Right.
empires, which were, all right, we're based here. We might move, but we're trying to conquer places.
Yeah, and we have all these different disparate peoples under our banner.
Yeah.
That claim to be also Roman, but then also kind of their own thing. But anyway, I digress. Quick topic. So you had this movement called the Cathars, which kind of sprang up in southern France around this time. The catechesis in the area was just very poor. And there was a lot of autonomy given to, like, the Count of Toulouse and a lot of the other, counts who kind of ruled over this territory. So, they were kind of, hey, if we're doing something that's kind of against what the French are doing, that's kind of okay with us, So you had this movement that sprang up. And there's a lot of controversy to what exactly the Albigensians believe, because especially in the modern day, we have this idea that if the opposing people talked about something, they were definitely lying. Right? They definitely weren't, talking legitimately about what these people believed, right? Which, again, could be true, could not be true, depends on the situation. But of course, all the sources we have on the Cathars come from the Dominicans, the Inquisition, from the Catholic Church. So people don't trust that as much.
Can I tell my favorite joke?
Yes, 'cause I know what it is.
Yeah, that the Dominicans were formed to combat Albigensianism, and the Jesuits were formed to combat Protestantism. When's the last time you talked to an Albigensian?
That's a fantastic one. It's true. But yeah, so they're called the Albigensians because this one of the cities that they are based in was the city of Albi in southern France. So Albigensian. That's kind of where they get that moniker.
Yeah.
So they believed in this dualistic theology, basically. That Christ was a spiritual being who appeared to be physical but wasn't really. And the spiritual world is good, and the evil created world is created by the evil God, and it's bad. So we're inherently sinful because we're in these bodies. We have to free ourselves. Classic Gnosticism, right?
Yeah.
Which is basically that same idea. And so they didn't believe in the sacraments because sacraments are physical, sacrament bad.
Yeah.
However, they did have one sacrament. I believe it was called consolamentum. And basically this was kind of like a I forget exactly what went into this, but it was a purification. It was like a baptism, but not obviously with water because water bad.
Right.
So it was like a baptism where it purges you from sin. However, they believed that because we're in these bodies, if we lived much longer after that, we'd fall back into sin. So you'd only get that sacrament before you died. And if you were sick and you started to recover, maybe we smother you with a pillow. Maybe we facilitate that. Like, they were, it's weird because they are against killing. Like, but obviously we're against, like,
Well, they're
murder
against
too.
killing, but they're also against the body. So, like, it's
Right,
like, it's like the ultimate good has to be for the soul. You know?
So again, this was becoming very popular in southern France around this time, and the church started to take notice. So the first sent, I believe this was the Carthusians they sent. However, part of Cathar doctrine was that they eschewed the world. So they didn't like material things. They didn't have a lot. They kept a very poor, austere lifestyle. They didn't want things. They didn't want any flashy bits of the world, which is commendable. That's fair. But the Carthusians, when they showed up, the Carthusians in southern France were very rich around this time. So they had a lot of material things, and the Cathars would see this, and they would be turned off from going back to Catholicism because they're like, oh, well, clearly you're showy. You're clearly trapped in the world. So around the same time, Saint Dominic shows up, and Saint Dominic was with his. This is a short one. I'm almost done. So Saint Dominic shows up with his bishop. They had gone to, I believe, Denmark because the King of Castile, I think, wanted to marry off one of his children to, like, the Princess of Denmark or something like that. So he had sent them up to go talk to the King of Denmark and get that situated. However, unfortunately, the daughter died, so they weren't able to actually make that happen. So on their way back, they kind of took a bit of a detour, went to Rome, or talked with the Pope a bit, and then the Pope kind of, they wanted to go off and preach to like the Muslims, go preach to the pagans, things like that. But the Pope's like, all right, I don't want you to go that far away. So southern France, we got this thing going on. Go preach to them. So, Dominic and him show up. And eventually the King of France, with, I think, the approval of the Holy See, declares a crusade down to this area because a papal legate was sent there, was killed by the Cathars, and there started to be some of this violence started to break out. So, as we did with crusades, if there's violence against the religion, we're sending troops out to kind of go retake it. There's indulgence involved, all the fun stuff. So the King of France sponsors this. He sends down Simon de Montfort, who was one of his generals from the north, to kind of help stamp out the Cathars. And this crusade starts. I think it was from like 1209 to 1229 because it was ended under the reign of Saint Louis the Ninth, who was King Louis Saint Louis. And so it's a bit of a controversial episode because a lot of people nowadays will call it a genocide because they went down and they said, oh well, they just killed everybody. There were, of course, it's worse. There was a lot of killing going on. Saint Dominic, for his part, tried to not let that happen. Like, he was friends with Simon de Montfort, and he would try to kind of like plead for the people, preach to them. He just wanted them to convert, and he had a lot more success than the Carthusians did because he lived a very simple lifestyle. He didn't have a lot of things. He was very simple, and they saw that, and that kind of was their bridge to kind of come back into the religion. So they were kind of around for a bit. Another one of their fortresses was the city of Carcassonne, which is if you ever see a picture of like that one French city in the countryside that still looks medieval with the city walls around it on the hill, that's Carcassonne. It's like the most well-kept city because it was actually rebuilt by the same guy who rebuilt Notre Dame in the 1800s. So he's like, I want to build a medieval city back to the way it was. So he went down there and did the same thing.
What a baller.
So that's awesome. I wish we did more of that.
We need more people who are like that. They're like, I want to restore Notre Dame, and also I'm going to restore this medieval city.
Right? So Saint Dominic was preaching, and this is also the Inquisition, begun through this because there was just priests in the area, not putting people to death, but trying to prosecute these. It's always a tricky thing to talk about because we think, oh, you're prosecuting somebody for their religion. That's not something we do these days. And well, yes, but you have to consider back in these days, good religion was part of a stable civil society. If people were descending from the religion, you're also descending from the society. So, there's a bit more interplay there. So, the Inquisition started up. St. Dominic's doing his thing where he's converting a lot of people back to the faith, in a very non-violent, murderous way, like some of the Crusaders were. It's also during this time that he had the vision, which where the Virgin Mary presented the rosary to him. So that comes out of the same time period. And then after that, he ended up starting the Dominicans, which then, of course, continued in that area and then also expanded to all of France. So there's no rhyme or reason behind any of this. I don't have any grand theory here. I'm just talking about the Albigensian Crusade because I was reading about St. Dominic a couple weeks ago. And it's a fascinating period because they are such a strange group. You know, like you think of heresies, like, you got obviously Protestantism would be considered a heresy, and you got, Gallicanism or Ultramontanism, or Jansenism. That's what I'm thinking of. Jansenism, like all these heresies that are basically Catholicism but taken to an extreme. This is kind of that, but also kind of a completely different thing.
Right.
It's like almost a different religion in the fact that they had their own sacrament, and if you started to recover after you get the sacrament, maybe we'll just kill you because that's easier than having you sin again.
It's more in the area of like Mormonism. That's like, this was started by Christian people, but it really isn't Christianity by this point. We've removed the sacraments from it. The one sacrament that you still have is, not counting marriage, but like the main sacrament you still have, you don't have the same fundamental understanding of it as we do. So this isn't even the same thing. It just has similar trappings, and so that's the other thing about them is that they did not like marriage, the Cathars, because marriage creates more people trapped in these bodies, and you don't want that. Right. So marriage, and also marriage is the vessel through which we get a certain bodily pleasure, and they were not happy with sex because again, it's carnal. Yeah, the Cathars are weird. But like it is a really fascinating thing because like as with most heresies, you can really see Like the only heresies that really took off were the ones that almost made sense.
Yeah.
You know, it's not that a bunch of people were just dumb. It's that a bunch of people latched onto a few things that made sense and mixed them with a couple of things that didn't quite make sense, but it had some logic behind it, and therefore it really seems cohesive. You know,
Like again, you see all the priests
it's
around
like
you.
a
They're all
really well written
dissolute.
story. It's not true, but it's really well written.
Right. All the priests around you aren't really that well catechized. They're all living these immoral lifestyles where they're giving into all these worldly pleasures. So, yeah, it's only natural that you'd be like, hey, aren't we supposed to be against that? And then, you run with it a bit, and then that's where you
makes
end
sense
up.
to me.
Yeah.
We have this one friend between us that like, God bless the man. He recently came back into the church. Like he had like a childhood in the church, but like past that didn't really get into it. And then he like really dove deep into it. And something that tends to be a thing with either converts or reverts is that you'll go through like at least a year where you like think that you're like discovering like new theories of the faith, and people are like, oh no, like we've already covered this. Like you think like, oh, I stumbled upon something like brilliant, and people will be like, oh yeah, Saint Teresa of Avila used to talk about that, and you're like, ah, okay. Like and so this one guy, he was he was talking to me. He's like, so I was thinking lately about the 7 deadly sins. I was wondering, why are these the only mortal sins? And I was like, no. Like, I already had to correct you.
Start over.
Yeah, start over. He's like, but why are these sins like graver than other sins or whatever? Like, why are these the 7 deadly sins? And then I realized it's because they're sins of the flesh and we're of the spirit. And I was like,
Yeah.
Gnosticism.
Hey.
And the amount of times in my life that I've been talking to like a recent convert or a recent revert, and they've said something like that, and I'm like, I really love your enthusiasm, and yet now I have to tell you that that's actually a heresy that was covered in early Christian council.
Yeah. A lot of them. Because it keeps coming back up. I mean, you had the Cathars. They're in the Middle Ages. You had I think they're like the, I forget what they're called, but there was a similar movement a couple centuries before in the Byzantine Empire. That sprang up in Orthodoxy. And you had the Gnostics, you had the Manichaeans back in St. Augustine's day. And even nowadays, I mean, like, transgender ideology is kind of a similar thing, where it's like, my flesh is something that is incorrect to the way that I am.
Yeah, so, like, so, brief note to our listeners, so because this involves my beloved godson, Corey. Continual prayers for my godson, Corey, would be lovely. He's in the Navy, and Navy's as fun as it always is. So prayers for him would be great. But there was one time that as he was coming into the church, he said to me, he's just trying, like, he's a very cerebral fella, very smart. And he says to me at the beginning, he goes, all right, so I'm just trying to like, learn like what the Catholics teach on different things. So I've been looking into a lot of things. He goes, can you explain the Trinity to me? And I went, no. Like I'm explaining like a bunch of things to him, and he's like, "Can you explain Trinity to me?" I'm like, no, I can't. And he's like, "What?" And I was like, "I could try. I would definitely fall into a heresy, like, because like the amount of times that people try to explain the Trinity, and they're like, so basically, it's one God. He just takes different forms. And it's like that's modalism, like,
Yep.
Like. It's like, you're so close yet so far. One of my favorite. This might be a heresy. And I don't mean to preach heresy, and obviously people can correct me, and I submit to the wisdom of Holy Mother of the Church. But one of my favorite descriptions of the Trinity I ever heard was from one of the girls in my youth group. That she's like, so would you say that the Trinity is like, this is like one of those like Shamrock things? Mm-hmm. It's like the Shamrock doesn't actually accurately portray what the Trinity is, but it's close enough to give a basic idea, right? And so like she goes, so it's like 3-in-1 it's like 3-in-1 shampoo, conditioner, and body wash. And I like thought about it for a second, and I was like, dang, that you might be onto something. That's actually great. She's like yeah, because like it's entirely body wash, it's entirely shampoo, it's entirely conditioner, and yet it's all 3. And I was like, wow, That's one of the better ones I've heard. Well done. She was like in middle school when she came up with this. Like
Yeah.
it was pretty insane.
Future St. Patrick right there.
Right. All right. This has been fun. I've enjoyed
We've
this.
been going for a bit, but yeah, it's been good. We've
Yeah.
covered a lot of disparate topics.
Yeah. So I'm probably gonna break this into a part 1, part 2, but otherwise we would finally have like a 2.5 hour episode. Yeah. Anyway, nicely done.
Yes.
All right. Glory to the Father and to the Son and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen.
Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Go be holy, everybody.